When is the wedding? It was yesterday. Only special people came. You invited everyone except me? You planned to sell my house? You weren't supposed to see that.
Mom, I can explain.
It's your experiment. I never thought you'd fight back. Now everyone knows who you are.
When is the wedding? Miriam Hale asked, still holding the pale blue dress she had bought for the ceremony. Across the kitchen, her daughter-in-law Lena smiled as if she had been waiting for the question. "We got married yesterday," she said. "Only special people were invited." Miriam looked at her son Max, but he stared at the floor. For 3 years, she had paid their rent, covered their emergencies, and quietly drained her retirement savings to keep them comfortable. Now, she was not even special enough to be told the truth. But Lena had forgotten one thing. Miriam kept records of everything, and that habit was about to matter more than anyone realized. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 3 years earlier, Miriam had mistaken dependence for love. At 71 years old, Miriam Hale lived alone in the house she and her late husband had bought nearly 4 decades earlier. It was not a mansion. It was not worth millions. It was simply a comfortable home in a quiet Ohio neighborhood, fully paid off and carefully maintained. After her husband passed away, Miriam learned how to manage everything herself. Taxes, insurance, repairs, investments. She paid her bills on time and kept detailed files in a cabinet beside her desk. People often assumed older women needed help. Miriam never did. What she wanted was companionship. That was why she had opened her heart so completely to Max and Lena. Max was 36. Lena was 34, both healthy adults, both fully capable of working. Yet somehow, every few months, another emergency appeared. A rent increase, a car repair, medical bills, credit card debt, unexpected expenses. At first, Miriam didn't mind helping. Family helped family. At least that was what she believed. The first year, she sent money occasionally. The second year, the requests became routine. By the third year, the transfers happened almost automatically. Sometimes Max asked. Sometimes Lena asked. Sometimes neither asked directly. They simply talked about their problems until Miriam offered. Looking back, she couldn't remember exactly when helping became expected, only that it had. A month before the wedding conversation, Lena had come over for coffee. Miriam remembered how excited she had been. Wedding planning was finally underway. For years, Max and Lena had talked about getting married someday. Now it seemed real. "We're trying to keep costs down," Lena had said with a tired smile. Miriam immediately felt sympathetic. Weddings were expensive. Before Lena could finish explaining, Miriam had already offered assistance. A few days later, she transferred her $800. Lena called it personal expenses. Miriam never asked for details. She trusted her. That trust felt painfully foolish now. Back in the present, she stood in her kitchen while Lena casually scrolled through her phone. The pale blue dress felt heavier in Miriam's hands. She had bought it 2 weeks earlier, nothing extravagant, just something elegant enough for photographs. Photographs she would never be in. "Only special people," Miriam repeated quietly. Lena shrugged. It was very intimate. Max finally spoke. "Mom, please don't make this a big thing. A big thing." The words stung. Miriam stared at him. For a moment, she searched for the son she thought she knew. The son who should have looked embarrassed. The son who should have apologized. Instead, she found a man who seemed uncomfortable only because he wanted the conversation to end, not because he had hurt her. "We didn't want drama," Lena added. Miriam almost laughed. Drama. She had paid part of their rent for 3 years. She had furnished half their apartment. She had spent holidays bringing groceries to their door. Yet somehow she was the source of potential drama. "I see," she said. The words sounded calm. Inside, she felt hollow. Max visibly relaxed when she didn't argue. Lena smiled politely. The conversation moved on. They talked about traffic, about restaurants, about nothing. After 20 minutes, they left. Neither apologized. Neither noticed that Miriam remained standing in the doorway long after their car disappeared. That evening, she sat alone at her kitchen table. The dress rested across a chair nearby. She stared at it for a long time. Then she opened her laptop. A part of her hoped she had misunderstood. Maybe the ceremony really had been tiny. Maybe only a few people attended. Maybe there was some explanation. She typed Lena's name into social media. The truth appeared immediately. Photo after photo, a wedding venue, a decorated reception room, champagne glasses, professional photographs, Lena's parents, Lena's adult siblings, friends, neighbors, coworkers, at least 20 people. Maybe more. Miriam clicked through each image carefully. Her chest tightened with every photograph. There was Max smiling. There was Lena dancing. There was a family group picture. Everyone looked happy. Everyone looked welcome. Everyone except the one person who wasn't there, the mother of the groom. The woman who had helped pay their bills for years. The woman who had quietly financed so much of the life they enjoyed. Miriam closed the laptop. The silence inside the house felt enormous. She walked into her bedroom, opened the closet, and hung the dress back on its hanger. For a moment, tears threatened to come, but they didn't, not yet. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed and began thinking. Thinking was safer than crying. Something about the entire situation felt wrong, not just hurtful. Wrong, she replayed the conversation. Every word, every expression, every glance, especially Max's silence. He hadn't looked guilty. He had looked prepared, as though he already knew exactly what Lena planned to say, as though they had discussed it beforehand. That thought bothered her more than anything. Around 10 o'clock, her phone buzzed, a text from her sister Evelyn. How was wedding planning going? Miriam stared at the screen. She had told everyone the wedding was coming. She had been excited, proud, hopeful. Now she didn't even know what to say. After several minutes, she typed a short response. Looks like I missed it. Her sister called immediately. Miriam let the phone ring. She wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, she walked into her home office. The small room overlooked the backyard. A filing cabinet stood beside the desk. She opened the lowest drawer. Inside were years of financial records, bank statements, transfer confirmations, receipts, invoices, insurance documents. Miriam had always been organized. Her husband used to joke that she could find a receipt faster than most people could find their keys. She smiled sadly at the memory. Then she noticed something strange. An envelope she didn't recognize sat near the front of the drawer. She pulled it out. The return address belonged to the apartment complex where Max and Lena lived. Her name appeared on the front, not theirs, hers. Confused, she opened it. Inside was a payment notice. The monthly rent was due in 7 days. The amount listed was $500. The exact amount Miriam had been paying every month for nearly 3 years. At first, she assumed it had been mailed to her by mistake. Then she saw the note attached to the bottom. Thank you for your continued support. Please contact the office if your payment method changes. Her stomach dropped. Continued support. Not emergency help, not temporary assistance support. As if everyone involved simply assumed she would always pay. As if her role had already been decided. Miriam lowered herself into the chair. The rent notice remained in her hands. Slowly, she looked around the room, at the files, the statements, the records, the evidence of years spent giving without asking questions. For the first time, a thought entered her mind that she could not ignore. What else had they assumed belonged to them? Outside, the night had grown quiet. Inside, Miriam reached for an empty folder. She wrote 3 words on the tab, Max and Lena. Then she placed the rent notice inside, and as she closed the folder, her phone vibrated again. A new message had arrived. Not from Max, not from Lena, from the apartment management office. The subject line read, Final reminder, wedding venue balance payment confirmation. Miriam froze. She had never paid a wedding venue. At least she didn't think she had. Miriam sat motionless in her office chair, staring at the email subject until the words blurred. Final reminder, wedding venue balance payment confirmation. Her name was not supposed to be anywhere near a wedding venue. She had not booked one. She had not signed a contract. She had not agreed to pay for flowers, champagne, music, or photographs that would never include her face. For a full minute, she did nothing. Then she reached for her glasses, put them on, and opened the email. It was brief, polite, and written in the dry tone businesses used when money had already changed hands. The message thanked her for the previous payment toward the remaining balance and reminded her that any outstanding amount should be settled according to the agreement on file. Miriam read the message twice, then a third time. There was no accusation in it, no drama, just a quiet record of something she had not known she was part of. Her first instinct was to call Max immediately. The phone sat on the desk only a few inches from her hand. She imagined his voice, tired and defensive. She imagined Lena in the background telling him what to say. She imagined herself explaining why she was hurt, why this was wrong, why excluding her from the wedding after taking her money was cruel. Then she stopped. For years, she had responded with emotion first. She had called. She had pleaded. She had tried to make people understand her pain. And every time, somehow, the conversation ended with her apologizing for having feelings. Not tonight. Miriam took a slow breath and clicked print. The old printer beside her desk came to life with a rough mechanical sound. While it printed, she created a folder on her computer and named it the same thing she had written on the paper folder. Max and Lena. She saved the email as a PDF, then took a photo of the screen with her phone. It felt excessive at first, almost suspicious, as if she were preparing for a battle that might never come. But the rent notice was already in the folder. The wedding email joined it. 2 pieces of paper, 2 quiet facts, 2 small cracks in the story Max and Lena had been telling her. By the time Miriam went to bed, she had not cried. That surprised her. She had expected the tears to come once the house was dark and she was alone with the blue dress still hanging in her closet. Instead, she lay awake with her hands folded over her stomach, listening to the low hum of the furnace and feeling something colder than grief settle inside her. Clarity. The next morning, the phone rang at 8:17. Lena's name appeared on the screen. Miriam watched it ring 3 times before answering. "Good morning, Lena." There was a tiny pause. Lena was used to a softer Miriam, one who sounded eager to help before the problem was even spoken. "Ren Miriam," Lena corrected quickly, her voice turning sweet. "I'm glad you picked up." Something strange happened with the rent. Miriam looked toward the folder on her desk. Strange how? "Well, the office says they haven't received the payment yet." Lena gave a short, nervous laugh. "I'm sure it's just a delay or something. Maybe the transfer didn't go through." Miriam stayed silent. Lena continued. "The landlord is being difficult. You know how they are. They said if it isn't handled soon, there could be late fees. Not eviction, not emergency, late fees." Miriam thought of the wedding photos, the champagne, the flowers, Lena's white dress, the smiling faces of everyone considered special enough to stand beside the bride and groom. "You're calling about rent," Miriam said. Another pause. "Yes. I mean, we need to make sure it's covered. Max has been under a lot of pressure this week, and after everything with the wedding, I really don't want him stressed. After everything with the wedding." As if Miriam had caused something. As if being excluded had been an inconvenience to them. Miriam turned the phone slightly in her hand. Her voice remained even. "Lena, I was not invited to your wedding." Lena exhaled sharply. "Miriam, please. We already explained that. It was intimate. I saw the photos." Silence. Miriam could hear something in the background. A cabinet closing. Maybe Lena moving through her kitchen. Maybe searching for privacy before changing tactics. "That was different," Lena said. "My parents helped with certain things. My family had to be there. You know how weddings are." Miriam closed her eyes briefly. Her family had to be there, and Max's mother did not? "Miriam, don't twist this." There it was, the shift, the sweetness thinning at the edges. "I'm not twisting anything," Miriam said. "I'm repeating what happened." Lena's voice lowered. "Are you really going to punish us over one day?" Miriam looked again at the folder. One day. It had taken Lena less than 24 hours to turn humiliation into a billing dispute. "No," Miriam said quietly. "I'm going to stop pretending one day was all it was." Lena gave a small laugh, but it had no warmth. "What does that mean?" "It means I won't be paying the rent today." The silence that followed was different from the others. Heavier. Real fear moved through it. "Miriam," Lena said, and now the sweetness was gone. "You can't just stop. We planned around that help. I know, you know." Lena sounded genuinely stunned. "Then why would you do this?" Miriam's hand trembled once, but her voice did not. "Because yesterday you told me only special people were invited. I finally understood that my money had a place in your life, but I did not. That is not fair." "No," Miriam said, "it wasn't." Lena inhaled sharply. "Max is going to be very upset." For years, that sentence would have worked. Miriam would have softened. She would have imagined Max worried, embarrassed, cornered. She would have rushed to fix things so he would not have to feel uncomfortable. This time, she only said, "Then Max can call me himself." Lena hung up without saying goodbye. Miriam lowered the phone slowly. Her heart was pounding now, not from regret, from the shock of hearing herself say no and surviving it. 10 minutes later, a text arrived from Max. "Mom, don't make this about the wedding." Miriam stared at the message for a long time. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to ask him what else she should make it about. The rent, the lies, the photographs, the fact that his wife had called only when a payment was missing. Instead, she took a screenshot. Then she placed the phone face down on the desk. The rest of the morning passed in a strange, focused quiet. Miriam made coffee, but it went cold beside her. She opened her online banking account and began searching through transfers. At first, she only meant to confirm the rent payments. $500 a month, 12 months, then another 12, then another, $18,000. Her mouth went dry. She kept going. 200 here for groceries, 400 there for a car repair, 800 for Lena's personal emergency, 1,000 for furniture after Lena said their apartment looked embarrassing when guests came over. Smaller payments scattered everywhere, each one explained at the time as temporary, urgent, unavoidable. Miriam opened a notebook and began writing numbers by hand. The act steadied her. It made the past concrete. It pulled each sacrifice out of the fog of love and placed it where she could see it. By noon, the total had already passed $29,000. She stopped only when her vision blurred, not from tears, from disbelief. Her son had let her believe she was helping them survive, but the photos from the wedding told another story. They had enough money for appearances. They simply preferred using hers for necessities. A new message came in from Max. Please answer. Lena is crying. Miriam almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. Lena had not cried when Miriam stood in the kitchen holding the dress she would never wear. Max had not worried then. Miriam did not answer. She opened the drawer, removed a fresh folder, and placed the handwritten list inside with the rent notice and printed email. Then she went back to the bank records, searching for the $800 transfer Lena had requested the month before. She found it quickly. The original memo line read, "Help for personal emergency." But beneath it, in the attached payment detail she had never opened before, there was a secondary note from the receiving account. Wedding venue balance. Miriam stared at those 3 words. Her hand went cold around the mouse, because now she knew the truth was not only cruel, it had been paid for with her money. Miriam kept her hand on the mouse for several seconds, as if letting go would make the words disappear. Wedding venue balance. It sat there in plain text, attached to a transfer Lena had described as a personal emergency. The room felt smaller than it had a moment before. Not because the house had changed, but because the truth inside it had. She did not call Max. She did not call Lena. She printed the payment detail, saved the page as a PDF, and took another photograph with her phone. Then she wrote the date on the top corner of the paper in neat blue ink. It was an old habit from years of keeping household records, but now it felt less like organization and more like self-defense. Miriam opened the folder and placed the new page behind the rent notice. The stack was still thin, but it had weight now. It proved something her heart had known before her mind was ready to say it. Lena had not just excluded her. Lena had used her money to do it. Her phone vibrated again. Max, this time, he called instead of texting. Miriam watched his name glow on the screen until it stopped. A voicemail appeared a few seconds later. She played it on speaker. "Mom, this is getting out of hand," Max said. His voice was tight, not angry exactly, but embarrassed. "Lena is really upset. We didn't mean to hurt you. But you can't just pull support without warning. We have obligations. Please don't make this about pride." Pride. Miriam replayed that word in her mind. Pride was not what had paid their rent. Pride had not bought their sofa. Pride had not written checks for groceries and repairs and late fees. Pride had not stood in a kitchen holding a dress for a wedding that had already happened. She saved the voicemail. Then she made a small decision. She would not speak to either of them until she understood exactly where her money had gone. The venue name appeared in the payment detail. Brookmere Hall. Miriam had never heard of it before, but a quick search showed a restored brick building on the edge of town, popular for small weddings and anniversary dinners. The photographs online were tasteful and expensive-looking. White lights, polished floors, long tables with linen runners. It was not extravagant, but it was far from an informal courthouse ceremony. Miriam clicked through the public gallery. She paused when she recognized the arch from Lena's wedding photos. Same windows, same gold chairs, same floral arrangement near the front. Her throat tightened. She opened Lena's social media page again. This time she did not look at the smiling faces. She looked at the details, the cake, the flowers, the photographer's watermark, the champagne label on a table behind Lena's father. Evidence had a way of hiding in plain sight when people thought no one would look carefully. Miriam took screenshots. Not to post, not to shame them, just to keep. At noon, she called Brookmere Hall. A young woman answered with a bright professional voice. "Brookmere Hall, this is Allison. How can I help you?" Miriam sat straighter. "Hello, my name is Miriam Hale. I received an email about a wedding venue balance payment confirmation. I'm trying to understand why my name is connected to it." There was a pause as the woman began typing. "Can I have the event date?" Miriam gave the date from the email. More typing. "Yes, I see the event. Hale Schuster Wedding." Schuster was Lena's maiden name. Hearing the names together made Miriam's chest ache in a fresh way. "The couple listed is Maxwell Hale and Lena Schuster Hale," Allison continued. "What was your question, Mom?" "I was not told I was connected to the account." Another pause. This one was more cautious. "I can only discuss limited information unless you're listed as an authorized payer." Miriam looked at the email on her desk. The confirmation was sent to me. That likely means your email was used for payment receipt purposes, Allison said carefully. I can confirm that a payment was made using an electronic transfer associated with the email address on file. Miriam did not move. My email address, she said. Yes, Mum. Can you tell me who added it? I'm sorry, I can't disclose account notes without written authorization from the contracting party. Of course, Miriam understood. Allison was doing her job. No reputable venue would hand out private contract information to anyone who called. That was exactly how things should work. Still, the answer told Miriam enough. Can you send me a copy of any receipt that was already sent to my email, she asked. That I can do, Allison said. If you received the original confirmation, I can resend the receipt to the same address. Please do. A minute later, Miriam's inbox refreshed. The receipt arrived. She opened it. The payment amount was $800, exactly the amount Lena had requested for her personal emergency. Miriam printed the receipt and placed it in the folder. Then she wrote one sentence on a yellow sticky note and attached it to the page. Lena said this was for an emergency. She stared at her own handwriting, simple, clear, impossible to argue with. By late afternoon, Max had called 3 more times. Lena had sent 2 texts. You are hurting us over nothing. Please don't embarrass the family. Miriam saved both messages. The second one bothered her more than the first. Don't embarrass the family. Not don't be hurt. Not let us explain. Not we should have invited you. Embarrassment was all Lena cared about. Miriam thought of the wedding photos still posted publicly, the comments congratulating them, the cheerful captions about love and family. Her own absence was invisible unless someone knew to look for it. That was the worst part. They had not only excluded her, they had counted on her silence to make the exclusion disappear. After dinner, Miriam sat at the table with a cup of tea she barely touched. The house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. She opened the folder again and spread the pages across the table. Rent notice, venue email, transfer detail, receipt, screenshots, Max's text, Lena's warning. It was not enough to prove a grand plan. Not yet, but it proved a pattern. Money requested one way, used another. Pain dismissed as pride, silence demanded in the name of family. Her hands no longer trembled when she gathered the papers back together. She placed the folder in the filing cabinet, then hesitated. For years, Max had known where she kept everything. He had helped her move that cabinet after her knee surgery 2 years earlier. He knew which drawer held bank statements. He knew where the spare house key was hidden outside. He knew too much because she had trusted him too much. Miriam removed the folder again. She walked to her bedroom, opened the closet, and took down a small fireproof lockbox from the top shelf. Inside were her birth certificate, her house deed, her will, and a few savings bonds her husband had left her. She placed the folder on top of them and locked the box. Then she put the key in her purse instead of back in the desk drawer. It was a small act, but it felt like a line. The next morning, Miriam woke before sunrise. Her first thought was not Max. That surprised her. For years, worry over her son's comfort had been the first thing that greeted her. That morning, she thought about passwords. After coffee, she changed the password on her email account, then her bank account, then her phone passcode. She wrote the new information on paper and placed it in the lockbox, not on the sticky notes near her computer where Max might have expected to find it. At 9:42, a notification appeared on her tablet. Miriam frowned. She rarely used the tablet anymore. Max had set it up for her several years earlier when he helped her print tax documents. She picked it up from the side table and saw an email preview banner across the top of the screen. The sender was Max. The recipient line, visible for only a second, showed Lena. The subject read, House Papers. Miriam froze. Then the preview expanded just enough for her to see the first sentence. Once she signs the house papers, we're safe. Miriam stared at the tablet screen. The notification remained visible for only a few seconds before disappearing, but she had already read it. Once she signs the house papers, we're safe. Her pulse hammered in her ears. The message was gone now, hidden somewhere inside an account that did not belong to her. Years earlier, Max had connected his email to her tablet while helping her print tax forms. Eventually, he must have forgotten to remove it. Miriam rarely used the device, and until this moment she had never paid attention to the notifications that occasionally flashed across the screen. She set the tablet carefully on the table. Her first instinct was to open the email. Her second instinct was stronger. The thought came with surprising clarity. She knew enough about privacy to understand the difference between seeing a notification that appeared on her own device and deliberately accessing someone else's account. If this situation ever became serious, she could not afford to make mistakes. Instead, she grabbed her phone. The notification history was still visible on the lock screen. Her hand shook as she took several photographs, one wide shot, one close-up, another showing the date and time. Only after she had multiple copies did she allow herself to breathe. House papers, safe. The word sat heavily in her mind. Safe from what? Safe for whom? The house belonged entirely to her. The deed had been in her name alone since her husband passed away. There was no mortgage, no shared ownership, no legal reason Max or Lena should be discussing her house at all, unless they believed that would change. Miriam opened the fireproof box from the closet and removed the deed. She spread the document across the dining room table. Her name, only her name. Everything looked normal. Still, she made copies. Then she scanned the deed into her computer and saved it on an external drive. The process took nearly an hour, but it calmed her. Facts were steadier than emotions. By lunchtime, she had assembled a second folder, House Documents. It sat beside the folder labeled Max and Lena. For the first time, Miriam admitted something to herself. This was no longer about a wedding. The wedding had been the wound. Something else was hiding underneath it. Her phone rang shortly after 1 o'clock. Max again. This time she answered. Mom, his relief was immediate. Thank God, I've been trying to reach you all morning. Miriam remained silent. Max exhaled loudly. Look, we need to stop this. Lena's upset. I'm upset. Everybody's upset. Everybody? Miriam asked quietly. Mom, come on. No, Max. Everybody wasn't upset when I found out about your wedding from your wife. The line grew quiet. We already talked about that. No, you explained it. That's different. Max's voice hardened. It was one day. Miriam closed her eyes. There it was again. One day, one event, one misunderstanding. As if years of loyalty could be erased and then reduced to a scheduling issue. It wasn't one day, she said. What do you want me to say? The question struck her harder than he probably intended. Not because it was cruel, because it was empty. Max wasn't asking how to fix the situation. He was asking how to end the conversation. I want the truth. You know the truth. No, Miriam replied. I know what you keep telling me. Max sighed heavily. Then he said something that made her stomach tighten. You've been acting differently lately. The sentence felt rehearsed, careful, prepared. Differently how? You seem suspicious of everything. You're overanalyzing stuff. Lena feels like you're looking for reasons to be offended. Miriam looked toward the folders on her table, the rent notice, the wedding payment, the messages, the screenshots. Evidence was not suspicion. It was evidence, I see, she said. Mom, you're making yourself miserable. No, Max. Her voice remained calm. I'm finally paying attention. The silence that followed lasted several seconds. Then Max changed subjects. So are you paying the rent or not? The directness almost made her laugh. There it was. No apology, no explanation, straight back to money. No, Mom, no. His frustration became audible. You can't just pull support overnight. I can. We depend on that. The words escaped him before he could stop them. Depend. Not appreciate. Not value. Depend. Miriam felt something inside her settle. The call ended 5 minutes later. Not with resolution. Not even with anger. Just distance. Afterward, she sat alone in her kitchen staring at the window. The trees outside moved gently in the afternoon wind. For years, she had believed helping Max made her a good mother. Now she wondered whether it had simply made him dependent. Around 3 o'clock, she decided to do something she should have done sooner. She called the attorney who had handled her husband's estate years earlier, Martin Weber. The receptionist answered. Law offices of Weber and Associates. Miriam almost hung up. This felt dramatic, extreme. The sort of thing people did after family wars, not during misunderstandings. Then she remembered the notification. House papers. Safe. May I schedule a consultation with Mr. Weber, she asked. The receptionist found an opening for the following morning. After hanging up, Miriam felt unexpectedly relieved. She wasn't filing a lawsuit. She wasn't accusing anyone of a crime. She was simply asking questions. Adults were allowed to ask questions before signing things, before trusting people, before losing control of their lives. The afternoon passed quietly. At 6:30, another notification appeared. This time it was a text message, Lena, not to Miriam, again appearing briefly through the old synchronization settings on the tablet. Miriam saw only a fragment before it vanished. Need to move faster, her heart skipped. She immediately photographed the screen history again. The message itself was inaccessible, only the preview remained. Need to move faster. Faster than what? Faster than Miriam asking questions? Faster than her discovering the transfers? Faster than whatever these house papers were? The uncertainty frightened her more than certainty would have. That evening, she barely touched dinner. Instead, she reviewed everything she had collected. Each document, each screenshot, each message. She created digital backups, printed copies, organized folders. By 9 o'clock, her dining table looked less like a family home and more like someone preparing for an audit. The realization saddened her. She had never imagined needing evidence against her own son. At 9:45, the doorbell rang. Miriam wasn't expecting anyone. Carefully, she approached the door. A delivery envelope rested on the porch. No courier, no vehicle, just the envelope. Her name was handwritten across the front. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. Nothing else, no signature, no explanation. Miriam unfolded it. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. Then her breath caught. It was a power of attorney form, mostly blank, but not entirely. Her name appeared in several places. And in the section identifying the proposed financial agents, 2 names had already been typed. Maxwell Hale, Lena Hale. Miriam stared at the page. A sticky note was attached to the top. The handwriting belonged to Lena. This will make everything easier for everyone. We can discuss it this weekend. Miriam looked again at the partially completed document, then at the note, then back at the document. Slowly, she noticed something else. At the bottom of the page was a date. The document had been prepared nearly 3 weeks before the wedding. 3 weeks before she learned she wasn't special enough to attend. 3 weeks before the rent dispute. 3 weeks before anyone claimed she was acting differently. Miriam sat down heavily in the nearest chair. The paper trembled in her hands. Because for the first time, she had proof that whatever Max and Lena were planning had not started after the wedding. It had started before it. Miriam barely slept. The power of attorney form remained on her kitchen table long after midnight. Every time she walked past it, the date pulled her attention back. 3 weeks before the wedding. 3 weeks before the humiliation. 3 weeks before Max started insisting she was acting differently. By 6 in the morning, she had made copies of everything. The notification screenshots, the rent records, the wedding payment transfer, the handwritten note from Lena, and now the power of attorney form. She placed the originals in her fireproof box and carried the copies in a leather folder to her appointment with Martin Weber. The attorney's office occupied the 2nd floor of a modest brick building downtown. It wasn't impressive, but it felt stable. Miriam appreciated that. She had spent too much time lately feeling as though the ground beneath her was shifting. When Mr. Weber entered the conference room, he looked older than she remembered. His hair had turned almost completely gray. His handshake remained firm. "Miriam," he said warmly, "it's been a long time." She smiled politely. "I wish this visit were social." His expression changed immediately. Within minutes, the documents were spread across the table. Mr. Weber examined each one carefully. He did not interrupt. He did not jump to conclusions. He simply read. When he reached the power of attorney form, he stopped. Then he checked the date. Then he checked it again. "Did you sign this?" "No." "Have they asked you to?" "Not directly." Mr. Weber leaned back. "Good." The single word carried more weight than she expected. "Why?" Miriam asked. He folded his hands. "Because once documents like this appear, people often begin presenting them as routine paperwork, temporary assistance, emergency planning, convenience, and this isn't that. It can be. Sometimes." His gaze returned to the document. "But the timing concerns me." Miriam felt her stomach tighten. "The date?" "The date." He tapped the paper. "If this was prepared weeks before the wedding issue, then it suggests the conversation was already happening." The room felt colder. Mr. Weber continued. "I can't tell you what Max and Lena intended. I can only tell you what I see. And what do you see?" "I see people discussing financial authority over someone who appears fully capable of managing her own affairs." The words landed hard, not because they were dramatic, because they were reasonable. Miriam had spent weeks wondering whether she was overreacting. Hearing an attorney state the situation plainly made it harder to dismiss. Mr. Weber picked up another document. "The screenshots, house papers. Need to move faster." His expression darkened slightly. "Have there been any changes to ownership?" "No." "Any new wills?" "No." "Any recent hospitalizations?" Miriam nodded. She explained the knee surgery from the previous year, the difficult recovery, the weeks she had spent relying on others for transportation and errands. Mr. Weber listened carefully. "Who helped during recovery?" "Mostly Max." "And Lena?" Miriam hesitated. "Sometimes." The truth was more complicated. Lena had appeared often enough to be seen helping, but many visits had involved conversations about simplifying finances, about planning for the future, about how stressful it must be to manage everything alone. At the time, Miriam had interpreted it as concern. Now she wasn't so sure. Mr. Weber made a few notes. Then he asked a question that caught her off guard. "Do any of your accounts still allow Max access?" Miriam frowned. "I don't think so." "You don't think so, or you know so." The distinction mattered. She suddenly realized she didn't actually know. Years earlier, she had added Max to a small checking account during her recovery in case bills needed to be paid while she was unable to drive. The arrangement had never been revisited. Mr. Weber noticed her expression. "Let's verify." An hour later, Miriam sat across from a bank manager she had known for years. The manager greeted her kindly but became serious once Miriam explained her concerns. After several minutes of reviewing records, the woman turned the monitor slightly. "There is one account with historical permissions." Miriam's chest tightened. "Max?" The manager nodded. The permission was limited, not ownership, not full control, but enough to view certain account information, enough to monitor balances, enough to know exactly how much money remained. Miriam felt embarrassed, not because she had trusted her son, because she had forgotten. The manager helped remove the access immediately. Several forms required signatures. Miriam read every line before signing, every line. The process took nearly 40 minutes. When it was finished, she felt strangely lighter. One door had closed, one vulnerability had disappeared. As she prepared to leave, the bank manager hesitated. "There is something else." Miriam looked up. The woman's tone had changed. "What is it?" The manager glanced toward the office door before continuing. "I probably shouldn't speculate." "Then don't speculate. Just tell me the facts." The manager nodded slowly. "A few weeks ago, someone called asking questions." Miriam froze. "What kind of questions?" "Questions about financial incapacity procedures." The room went silent. Miriam felt her heartbeat in her throat. "Who called?" "I can't disclose private inquiries." The answer was expected. The manager wasn't violating policy. Still, the implication hung heavily between them. What exactly did they ask? The manager chose her words carefully. They wanted general information about what happens if an elderly customer can no longer manage finances independently. Miriam stared at her. The timing aligned too perfectly. A power of attorney, house papers, need to move faster, questions about incapacity. None of it proved anything. But together it painted a picture she could no longer ignore. When she returned home that afternoon, exhaustion settled over her. Not physical exhaustion, something deeper. The fatigue that came from realizing a painful possibility might actually be true. Her son may not have been protecting her. He may have been preparing for her, preparing to take over. Her phone buzzed. Max. She considered ignoring it. Instead, she listened. "Mom." His voice sounded unusually cheerful, too cheerful. "We were thinking about stopping by tonight." Miriam said nothing. Lena made dinner. Still silence. "We thought it would be good to talk face to face." The invitation felt less like an invitation and more like an inspection. "We?" "Me and Lena." "No." The word surprised even her. Max paused. "What?" "No." Another silence. Then irritation entered his voice. "You won't even talk to us now?" "I'll talk to you." "When?" "When I'm ready." "Mom, you're making this harder than it needs to be." There it was again. The assumption that compliance was the easy path, that boundaries were complications. Miriam's grip tightened around the phone. "I won't be discussing my finances." "I wasn't calling about finances." The lie came too quickly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Max sighed. "Fine." The call ended. Miriam sat quietly for several minutes afterward. The sadness remained, but something else had appeared beside it. Clarity. For the first time, she understood that protecting herself might require disappointing her son. That realization hurt more than any wedding exclusion ever could. As evening approached, she carried her folders upstairs. The fireproof box no longer felt sufficient. She wanted everything organized, everything protected. While sorting paperwork in her bedroom closet, she noticed an old document envelope she hadn't opened in years. Inside were property records related to her late husband's estate. Most of the contents were familiar. Then one page caught her attention, a memorandum from years ago. Attached to it was a visitor log from the attorney's office. Miriam almost set it aside. Then she saw a name. Max Hale. The date was 18 months earlier, long before the wedding, long before the rent disputes, long before any discussion about helping her manage finances. Her pulse quickened. She read the entry twice. The log showed Max had requested information regarding estate procedures and property transfer requirements after a parent's death. Nothing illegal, nothing suspicious by itself, but it raised a question she could not ignore. Why had Max been researching inheritance procedures a year and a half ago, and why had he never mentioned it? Miriam slowly lowered herself into a chair. The document rested in her lap. Outside, darkness settled over the neighborhood. Inside, a new possibility was beginning to take shape. Maybe the plan hadn't started before the wedding. Maybe it had started much earlier. Miriam kept the old visitor log in her lap until the paper began to bend beneath her fingers. Max's name sat there in plain blank, dated 18 months earlier, tied to a request about estate procedures and property transfer requirements. It was not proof of wrongdoing. Mr. Weber had said enough that day for her to understand the difference between suspicion and evidence. But it was another mark on a growing line, and the line kept pointing in the same direction. She scanned the visitor log that night, copied it, and placed the original back inside the estate envelope. Then she added the copy to the folder with a note written in her careful handwriting. Max asked about inheritance procedures 18 months before current conflict. She stared at that sentence for a long time after writing it. It sounded cold. It sounded like something a stranger would write. That hurt more than she expected. By morning, Miriam knew she had to go back to the bank. Removing Max's old viewing permission had not been enough. She needed a complete record, printed and organized, not scattered across online screens and memory. If Max and Lena were going to treat her finances like something waiting to be managed, then she needed to understand every door they might try to open. She arrived at the bank shortly after it opened. The manager, Carolyn Ellis, recognized her from the day before and led her into the same small office. Carolyn was careful, professional, and kind without being intrusive. Miriam appreciated that more than she could say. "I'd like printed statements for all accounts from the past 3 years," Miriam said. "And I want to confirm there are no authorized users, online delegates, or linked notification permissions that I've forgotten about." Carolyn nodded. "We can review everything. It may take a while." "I have time." The words felt good. For once, she was not rushing to solve a crisis for Max. She was solving one for herself. They went through each account slowly. Checking, savings, a small money market account, a certificate of deposit that had renewed automatically the previous year. Miriam had always been careful with money. She was not wealthy, but she had enough to live modestly and keep the house secure. That had been the whole point of her husband's planning. Safety, not luxury. Carolyn printed forms, statements, and access summaries. Miriam read each page before signing anything. Every time Carolyn asked if she wanted to proceed, Miriam answered clearly, yes. Remove old access. Yes. Change the security questions. Yes. Add verbal verification for phone inquiries. Yes. Mail alerts to her address only. The process was ordinary. Paperwork, signatures, verification codes. But to Miriam, it felt like taking back rooms inside her own life that she had left unlocked for too long. Near the end, Carolyn paused at the computer. Miriam noticed immediately. "What is it?" Carolyn's eyes stayed on the screen. "There was an attempted online login last night." Miriam sat very still. "From where?" "I can't identify the person, but I can see the attempt was blocked after the password change. It came from a device not currently recognized on your account." The room became quiet. "Could it have been me?" Carolyn turned the monitor slightly, not enough to expose anything private beyond Miriam's account security page. "This shows your successful login from your home computer yesterday morning." The blocked attempt was later, around 10:38 p.m. Miriam had been upstairs then, sorting estate documents, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Can we save that record?" "Yes," Carolyn said. "I can print the security log." Miriam watched the page slide from the printer. It showed the date, time, and blocked attempt. No name, no accusation, just a fact, another fact. When Carolyn handed it to her, Miriam placed it carefully in the leather folder. "Mrs. Hale," Carolyn said, then stopped. Miriam looked up. The bank manager's expression was cautious. "I'm not saying this is what's happening here. But when an older customer is facing pressure from family about finances, we take it seriously. You may want to speak with your attorney about whether this fits a pattern of financial exploitation." The phrase struck Miriam hard. Financial exploitation. She had heard of such things on the news. Strangers, caregivers, scam calls, people who preyed on lonely seniors. It had never occurred to her that the danger could sit across from her at Thanksgiving dinner, smiling while asking for help with rent. "I'm meeting with Mr. Weber again soon," Miriam said. "Good." Carolyn lowered her voice slightly. "Also, yesterday you asked about the person who called with questions about incapacity. I can't identify callers without proper authorization or a legal process, but I can tell you this. The caller knew enough personal information to pass general screening questions before being transferred." Miriam felt the blood drain from her face. "What kind of information?" "Basic things. Address, date of birth, last 4 digits of a phone number. Details that a close family member might know." A close family member. There was no need for Carolyn to say more. Miriam thanked her and left with a folder much thicker than when she had arrived. Outside, she sat in her car for several minutes before turning the key. The parking lot looked normal. People walked in and out carrying coffee cups and deposit envelopes. Life was moving around her as if nothing had changed, but something had. She was no longer only hurt, she was alert. On the drive home, Max called twice. She did not answer. Then Lena called. Miriam let that go, too. Silence had once been her weakness. Now it was her strategy. She needed them to talk in writing where their words could not be softened later. At home, she set the bank records on the dining table and began sorting. The 3-year statements showed the full pattern more clearly than her handwritten notes had. Rent, groceries, repairs, medical bills Lena had described as urgent, small transfers that looked harmless alone but added up month after month. Then she saw something she had missed before. A recurring payment of $39.99. The description was vague, document storage subscription. Miriam frowned. She did not remember signing up for any such service. She searched the payment history. The charge had begun almost a year earlier. It was small enough to overlook, buried among utilities and insurance payments, but it had come from her card. Her card. She called the customer service number attached to the merchant line. After 10 minutes of automated menus and verification, a representative confirmed that the account was registered under an email address Miriam did not recognize. "Can you tell me the name on the account?" Miriam asked. "I'm sorry, Mom. I can't provide full account details since you're not the registered user, but the payments are coming from my card." "Yes. You can dispute the charges with your bank." Miriam wrote down the reference number and hung up slowly. A document storage subscription. Paid with her card, registered to someone else. Her mind went at once to the power of attorney form, house papers, estate procedures, property transfer requirements. She did not know what was stored there. She did not know who opened the account. But she knew one thing. Someone had been using her money to keep documents hidden from her. By late afternoon, Miriam had disputed the charge, canceled the card, and requested a replacement. She changed another round of passwords, then placed the security log and subscription notes into her evidence folder. The folder no longer felt small. It felt alive, growing with every lie that tried to hide itself behind family. At 5:12 p.m., Max finally texted, "We need to talk tonight. This is not optional." Miriam stared at the message. Her son had never spoken to her that way before. A second message followed. "Lena and I are coming over. Don't make this harder." Miriam stood in the kitchen, holding the phone in one hand and the evidence folder in the other. For the first time all week, fear moved through her body with real force. Not because she thought Max would hurt her, because he still had a key. She went to the front door and checked the deadbolt. Then she checked the back door. Then the garage entrance. Every lock was secure. For now. At 5:47, a car pulled up outside. Miriam stepped away from the window and turned off the kitchen light. Through the thin gap in the curtain, she saw Max get out first. Lena followed, carrying a slim black folder against her chest. Miriam looked at the folder, then at the door, then at the spare key hanging from Max's key ring as he walked up the porch steps. He did not knock first, he simply reached for the lock. The key slid into the lock. Miriam stood in the darkened kitchen, one hand gripping the edge of the counter, listening as Max tried to turn it. For one terrible second, old habit rose inside her. She almost moved toward the door. She almost opened it for him before he could feel rejected. That was what she had always done. She made things easier. She spared him discomfort. She let herself be inconvenienced so he would not have to face a closed door. Then she looked at the evidence folder on the table. She stayed still. The lock clicked, but the deadbolt held. Max tried again, harder this time. "Miriam?" Lena's voice came through the door, sharp and irritated. "We know you're home." Miriam stepped into the hallway and turned on the porch light. Through the glass panel beside the door, she could see Max standing with her old spare key in his hand. Lena stood slightly behind him, the slim black folder pressed against her chest like a shield. Miriam did not open the door. "Max," she said through the closed door. "Why are you trying to enter my house without permission?" His face changed. First surprise, then embarrassment, then annoyance. "Mom, don't be ridiculous, it's me. That doesn't answer the question." Lena leaned forward. "We came to talk. You're ignoring calls, ignoring texts, and now you're locking your own son out?" Miriam kept her voice even. "The door is locked because this is my home." Max lowered the key slowly. "We're not strangers." "No," Miriam said. "Strangers usually knock." The words hung in the cold air between them. For a moment, Max looked wounded. That almost broke her. Even now, after everything, she still hated seeing pain on his face. But then Lena placed a hand on his arm and the look shifted. He straightened as if remembering the role he had come to play. "Mom, open the door," he said. "We need to handle this like adults." Miriam thought of the power of attorney form prepared before the wedding. She thought of the blocked login attempt. She thought of the document storage charge made to her card. Adults did not sneak through a door with an old key while carrying paperwork they had not been invited to discuss. "I'll speak to you from here." Lena's mouth tightened. That's absurd. It's my decision. Max looked over his shoulder toward the street as if worried a neighbor might notice. That small glance told Miriam more than any speech could. He was not ashamed of trying to enter. He was ashamed of being seen failing. Fine, he said, then take the folder. He held out his hand. Miriam did not move. What is it? Just some paperwork, Lena said quickly. Nothing dramatic. Miriam looked at her. If it's nothing dramatic, you can mail it. Lena's smile was thin. You're making everything hostile. No, Miriam said. I'm asking what you brought to my house. Max exhaled hard. Mom, it's a temporary financial authorization. That's all. There it was. Temporary financial authorization. The harmless words people used when they wanted to soften something dangerous. I've already seen one, Miriam said. Both of them froze. Lena recovered first. What do you mean? One was left on my porch. Lena's face flickered. Not much, just enough. Her fingers tightened around the folder. That was so you could review it, she said. We didn't want to pressure you. Miriam almost smiled. They had tried to unlock her door without knocking, yet Lena still managed to say the word pressure as if Miriam were imagining things. I won't sign anything. Max's expression darkened. You haven't even read it. I read enough. You don't understand what it's for. Then explain it. Max opened his mouth, but Lena cut in. It would allow us to help you manage bills, accounts, and property matters if needed. At your age, things can get overwhelming. At your age. Miriam felt that one landed exactly where Lena intended. Not as concern, as reduction. A way to make 71 sound like evidence against her. My bills are current, Miriam said. My taxes are paid. My house is maintained. My accounts are mine. Lena gave a soft laugh. No one said they weren't. Then why do you need authority over them? Silence. A car passed slowly on the street. Its headlights swept across the porch, illuminating Max's face for a moment. He looked tired, frustrated, cornered. Miriam searched again for guilt and found something worse. Expectation. He truly believed she should cooperate. Mom, he said, lowering his voice, you had surgery last year. You struggled for weeks. We helped you. That's normal. Families plan for things. Miriam remembered that recovery, the pain, the walker. The way Max had brought groceries and paid a few bills for her when she could not drive. She had been grateful then, deeply grateful. She had never imagined that one period of vulnerability might someday be used as an argument for taking authority. That was temporary help, she said, not permission to take over my life. No one is taking over your life, Lena snapped. Miriam looked at the black folder. Then leave the paperwork with your attorney and have them contact mine. Max blinked. Your attorney? Yes. Lena's eyes sharpened. You hired a lawyer? I spoke with one. That is exactly what we're talking about, Lena said, turning to Max as if Miriam had just proved something. This is paranoid. Normal families don't run to lawyers. Normal families don't prepare power of attorney papers before secretly excluding a mother from a wedding, Miriam said. Max flinched. For the first time, he looked directly at her without defense. The pain in that moment felt honest, but honesty did not last. That's not fair, he said. It happened. You keep acting like we attacked you. Miriam's voice lowered. You took my money for a wedding I wasn't invited to. Lena's expression hardened completely. That money was a gift. It was requested for an emergency. Max looked at Lena. It was quick, almost nothing, but Miriam saw it. A glance, a question, a crack. Lena immediately said, You're twisting records now? No, I'm keeping them. That changed the air. Max's attention shifted to the house behind Miriam, as if he could somehow see through the walls to the folders, the lockbox, the documents she had secured. Lena took a half step closer to the door. What exactly are you keeping? She asked. Miriam realized then that she had said enough. Too much, maybe. I'm done for tonight. Mom, open the door, Max said. No. Lena's voice turned cold. You realize how this looks, don't you? Refusing to let family in, cutting off support without warning, hiring a lawyer. Hiding behind locked doors. Miriam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. That sounded like a list, not an argument. A list someone might repeat later to someone else. I am not hiding, Miriam said. I am setting a boundary. Lena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That's a nice phrase. Did your lawyer give you that one? Max shifted uneasily. Lena. No, Lena said. She wants to act like we're enemies? Fine. Miriam reached for the side table near the door and picked up her phone. She opened the camera app, keeping the screen low. She did not point it in their faces. She simply recorded the audio and the closed door because she suddenly understood that this conversation might matter later. Please leave, she said clearly. Max stared at her. You're really doing this? Yes. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Lena leaned closer to the glass. You're going to regret shutting us out, she said quietly. People are already noticing you're not acting like yourself. Miriam's grip tightened around the phone. Max turned sharply. Lena, stop! But the words were already out. People are already noticing. Miriam looked at her son. What people? Lena stepped back. Max avoided Miriam's eyes. What people, Max? He said nothing. Lena pulled him down the porch steps. Come on, we'll handle this another way. They walked to the car in silence. Lena got in first. Max lingered beside the driver's door, looking back at the house. For 1 second, Miriam thought he might return. Apologize, explain, choose her. He didn't. He got in the car and drove away. Miriam kept recording until the taillights disappeared. Then she locked the deadbolt again, though it had never been opened. Her hands shook now, but she did not collapse. She saved the recording, backed it up to her computer, and wrote the date and time in her notebook. Then she removed the old spare key from the hook in the mudroom. It was the matching copy to the one Max had just used. For the first time, she noticed the small metal tag attached to it, the one she had written years ago in permanent marker. Max. She placed it inside an envelope and wrote another note. Locks must be changed. Before she could put the envelope into her folder, her tablet lit up again on the dining table. A notification preview flashed across the screen. From Lena, subject, wellness concern draft. Miriam stepped closer, her breath catching. The first line appeared before the screen went dark. She is refusing contact, making irrational financial decisions, and may no longer be safe, living alone. Miriam stood over the tablet, staring at the dark screen long after the notification vanished. She is refusing contact, making irrational financial decisions, and may no longer be safe, living alone. The words were not spoken in anger on her porch. They were written, drafted, prepared. They sounded official in a way Lena's insults never had. That frightened Miriam more than the power of attorney form, more than the blocked bank login, more than the spare key turning in her lock. This was no longer family pressure. This was a record someone intended to send. She took photographs of the notification history before touching anything else. Her fingers moved carefully. Date, time, sender, subject, visible preview. She did not open the message. She did not need to. The sentence itself was enough to show direction, if not the whole road. After backing up the images, she called Mr. Weber's office and left a message with the answering service. Her voice sounded steady, though her chest felt tight. This is Miriam Hale. Max and Lena came to my home tonight with financial authorization papers. I refused to let them in. I also saw a draft message referring to a wellness concern. Please call me as soon as possible. She hung up and stood in the hallway for several seconds, listening to the old house settle around her. She had always loved those sounds. The soft creak of wood, the hum of the refrigerator, the low click of the thermostat. Tonight they reminded her that she was alone, not helpless, alone. There was a difference, and she held on to it. The next morning, she called a locksmith before breakfast. The man who answered sounded surprised when she asked for same-day service, but he found an afternoon opening. Miriam did not apologize for the urgency. She had spent enough of her life apologizing for needing basic respect. Then she called Mr. Weber again. This time he answered directly. She described the visit, the old key, the folder, the words Lena had used, the notification about the wellness draft. Mr. Weber did not interrupt until she finished. Did you record the conversation? He asked. Yes. Audio only, through my own closed door. Ohio is generally a one-party consent state for recording conversations, but I'll review the context before relying on it. For now, preserve it. Don't edit it, don't send it around. I won't. And do not speak with adult services or any investigator alone if someone contacts you. You can be polite, but ask to have counsel present. Miriam gripped the phone. Do you think they'll really do that? I think they already prepared language for it, he said carefully. That doesn't mean it will go anywhere. But we need to treat it seriously. The word seriously followed Miriam through the morning. At 1 o'clock, the locksmith arrived. He was a middle-aged man named Victor, polite and efficient. He changed the front door, back door, and garage entrance locks. Miriam watched him work from the hallway, feeling sadder than she expected. Changing locks should have felt empowering. Instead, each old cylinder removed from the door felt like a small funeral, a funeral for trust. When Victor handed her the new keys, he asked how many copies she wanted. 2, Miriam said. Just 2? Yes. 1 for herself. 1 for the fireproof box. No spare under the planter. No copy for Max. Victor gave her a receipt. She placed it in the folder. By 3 o'clock, the house felt safer, but Miriam did not feel calm. She carried the evidence folders into her office and began making a timeline, not a dramatic one. A practical one: dates, amounts, incidents, wedding transfer, secret ceremony, rent call, power of attorney, bank access removal, blocked login, document storage charge, porch confrontation, wellness concern draft. Seeing the events in order made her hands go cold. Individually, each moment could be explained away. Together, they looked deliberate. At 4:18, the doorbell rang. Miriam froze. The new locks suddenly mattered. She walked to the window and looked out. A woman stood on the porch holding a folder and wearing a county identification badge. She appeared to be in her early 50s with tired eyes and a careful expression. Miriam did not open the door immediately. She spoke through it. "Can I help you?" "Mrs. Miriam Hale? My name is Sandra Price. I'm with County Adult Protective Services. We received a wellness concern and wanted to check in." Miriam's mouth went dry. Even expecting something did not make it painless when it arrived. She glanced at the table, where the timeline sat unfinished. "What kind of concern? I'd prefer to speak in person, Mom." Miriam remembered Mr. Weber's instruction. "I'm represented by counsel in a family financial matter. I'm happy to schedule a time to speak with you with my attorney present." Sandra's expression shifted through the glass. Not hostility, professional caution. "This is not a legal proceeding," she said. "It's a wellness check. I understand. But I'm not comfortable answering questions without my attorney." A pause. Sandra looked toward the driveway, then back at the door. "That is your right. May I at least confirm that you are safe?" "I am safe. I live independently. I changed my locks today because someone attempted to enter my home last night without permission using an old key." Sandra's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Who attempted to enter?" "My adult son and daughter-in-law." Sandra wrote something down. Miriam felt a small shift then, not victory, but balance. Lena had tried to frame locked doors as paranoia. Miriam had calmly explained why the locks existed. "May I have your attorney's contact information?" Sandra asked. Miriam provided Mr. Weber's office number through the door. She also asked Sandra to leave a business card in the mailbox. Sandra did. Before leaving, the woman said, "Mrs. Hale, I want you to know a report doesn't mean a finding. It only means we follow up." "I understand." The words were civil. But after Sandra drove away, Miriam locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. A report. They had actually filed a report. Not threatened, not hinted. Filed. Her phone rang almost immediately. "Lena." Miriam let it go to voicemail. A moment later, a message appeared. "Please don't make this worse. We were only trying to get you help." Miriam saved it. Then came Max. "Mom." Lena didn't have a choice. "You scared us last night." Miriam stared at the text. She had scared them. By not opening her door, by not signing, by not paying, by not obeying. Her sadness sharpened into something steadier. She took screenshots, added them to the digital folder, and wrote 2 more lines on her timeline. "APS wellness visit after refusal to sign papers." Texts from Lena and Max confirm report was connected to help. At 5:30, Mr. Weber called back. Miriam told him Sandra had come and that she had not opened the door or answered detailed questions. "Good," he said. "Very good. She seemed reasonable. She probably is. Most are. That's why we respond calmly and document everything." Miriam looked toward the mailbox where Sandra's card still rested. "What happens now? Likely she'll call me. We'll provide evidence that you're competent, independent, and facing pressure over money. We may also need documentation from your physician." "My doctor?" "Yes. A simple letter regarding your capacity can help if this escalates." Miriam closed her eyes. She hated this. She hated that her age had become something to defend against. She hated that her own son's family had made her prove she was capable inside the house she owned. But she also knew what she had to do. The next morning, she called her doctor's office and scheduled an appointment for the earliest available time. Then she placed Sandra's business card into the evidence folder and locked the fireproof box again. By noon, the county worker had called Mr. Weber. By 2, Mr. Weber called Miriam. His tone was controlled, but she knew him well enough now to hear concern beneath it. Sandra Price received a detailed report, he said. It mentioned sudden financial changes, isolation, refusing family contact, possible paranoia because of changed locks, and concern that you were being influenced by legal advice. Miriam said nothing. Every phrase came directly from Lena's mouth. Then Mr. Weber continued. "There's one more thing. The report also claimed you've recently shown memory problems and refused medical help." Miriam opened her eyes. "That's not true, I know. But we need to find out whether anyone has contacted your doctor." Miriam looked down at the appointment card beside her phone. For the first time all day, the house did not feel quiet. It felt watched. Miriam sat at her kitchen table with the appointment card beside her phone, staring at it as if it had become evidence too. The doctor's office was supposed to be one of the last places where she still felt safe. Her physician, Dr. Elaine Morton, had treated her for more than 12 years. She had seen Miriam through high blood pressure scares, knee surgery, grief after her husband's death, and the ordinary aches that came with age. Now even that quiet relationship had been pulled into Max and Lena's story. Her appointment was at 10 the next morning. Miriam arrived 20 minutes early with her leather folder tucked under her arm. The receptionist greeted her by name, then paused with the careful smile people used when they knew something awkward but did not want to show it. That pause told Miriam enough. When the nurse called her back, Miriam followed without speaking. Her blood pressure was higher than usual. The nurse frowned at the reading and asked if she had been under stress. Yes, Miriam said. But I know why. Dr. Morton entered a few minutes later. She was a calm woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked hair and direct eyes. She closed the door behind her, sat down, and looked at Miriam for a long moment before opening the chart. I'm glad you came in, Dr. Morton said. Miriam's hands tightened in her lap. Has someone contacted you about me? The doctor did not pretend not to understand. Miriam respected her for that. Yes, she said. Your daughter-in-law called the office twice. Your son called once. Miriam felt the words move through her like cold water. What did they say? Dr. Morton folded her hands on the desk. They said they were concerned about sudden changes in your behavior, that you had become suspicious, that you were refusing help, that you were making financial decisions that seemed out of character. Miriam looked down. Financial decisions. They made it sound clinical. They made it sound like symptoms, not boundaries. Did you tell them anything? Miriam asked. No. They are not authorized to receive your medical information. I told them that clearly. Relief came, but only partly. The call itself still hurt. They also asked Dr. Morton continued carefully whether I would be willing to document concerns about your ability to manage independently. Miriam looked up sharply. There it was. Not concern. Construction. They were building something. Did you? No. Miriam exhaled. Dr. Morton's face softened. But I did document that the calls happened. For the first time that morning, Miriam felt the balance shift slightly back toward her. You did? Yes. Any call like that gets noted, especially when it involves requests about capacity. Miriam opened her folder and slid several pages across the desk. She did not give Dr. Morton everything, only enough. The wellness report which from Mr. Weber's notes, the power of attorney form, the screenshot of Lena's draft about irrational financial decisions, the text from Max saying Lena had no choice and Miriam had scared them. Dr. Morton read quietly. Her expression changed slowly, not shock, recognition. I see, she said at last. Miriam hated how small her voice sounded when she answered, I need to know if I'm losing my mind. Dr. Morton looked at her immediately. Miriam. The firmness in her tone almost broke something open. Being hurt by manipulation is not the same as losing your mind. Miriam stared at her. For days she had been collecting evidence like a woman building a wall against a storm. But some part of her had still wondered whether grief, age, and loneliness had made her too sensitive, whether she had taken things too far, whether protecting herself meant becoming the difficult old woman Lena kept describing. Dr. Morton pushed the paper gently back toward her. You are under stress. That is clear, but from my medical history with you, I have no reason to believe you lack capacity. Can you put that in writing? Yes, Dr. Morton said. I can write a letter stating that based on my treatment history and today's visit, I have not observed cognitive impairment that would prevent you from managing your own affairs. I can also recommend a formal cognitive screening if your attorney wants additional documentation. Miriam nodded. I want the screening. Dr. Morton studied her. Are you sure? It may feel uncomfortable. So does being accused. The doctor did not argue. For the next 40 minutes, Miriam answered questions, completed memory tasks, followed instructions, counted backward, identified dates, explained medication routines, and discussed her household finances. None of it was difficult. What hurt was knowing why she had to do it. When it was finished, Dr. Morton removed her glasses and smiled gently. You did well. Very well. Miriam pressed her lips together. The relief was almost painful. I'll prepare the letter, Dr. Morton said, and I'll include that concerns raised by family members were not supported by my examination today. Miriam closed her eyes. That sentence mattered. It was not revenge. It was protection. Before leaving, she stopped at the front desk and requested copies of the documented calls from Max and Lena where legally available in her own patient record. The receptionist said it might take a few days and require a signed request. Miriam signed it. She read every line first. Outside, she sat in her car with the engine off. The parking lot was full of ordinary people moving through ordinary appointments. A man leaned on a cane near the entrance. A woman in scrubs drank coffee beside her car. A couple in their 70s walked slowly toward the building together. Everyone had their own worries. Miriam knew that. But hers had begun wearing familiar faces. She called Mr. Weber from the car and told him what Dr. Morton had said. Good, he replied. Very good. That letter may be important if they continue. They already called her. I suspected they might. Miriam looked through the windshield. They asked her to document concerns. Mr. Weber was silent for a moment. That is significant. Is it enough to stop them? Not by itself. But it helps show a pattern. Pattern, that word again. A pattern was not a single cruel remark or one selfish decision. It was repetition, direction, intent. Miriam hated that the word fit. By the time she returned home, Dr. Morton's office had already emailed a patient portal notice confirming a letter would be available within 2 business days. Miriam printed the notice and added it to the folder. Then she made tea, though she barely drank it. At 3:06, her tablet lit up. Miriam moved carefully this time. She took her phone and stood ready before touching the screen. A new email preview appeared. From Lena. The recipient line showed a name Miriam did not recognize. Subject: Next steps after guardianship. Miriam's breath caught. The preview was longer than usual. 4 short lines appeared on the screen before dimming. After guardianship, we can sell before winter. Max needs the debt cleared before it hits his credit again. She'll fight at first, but the wedding proved she'll accept humiliation if Max stays quiet. Miriam photographed it. Then she photographed it again. Her hand shook so badly that the second image blurred. She took a third. This one was clear. For a moment, the room went utterly still. The house around her no longer felt watched. It felt claimed. Not legally, not yet. But in their minds, her home had already become their solution. Her pain had become a test. Her son's silence had become part of a plan. Miriam lowered the phone slowly and looked toward the framed photograph of her late husband on the shelf. She did not cry. The tears would come later, maybe. But not now. Now she opened the folder. Now she printed the screenshots. Now she wrote the date, time, and exact visible words on a clean sheet of paper. At the bottom, she added one sentence. This is the first time I saw the word guardianship. Miriam stared at the printed screenshot for a long time after the ink dried. The words looked worse on paper. Not because they were different, but because they were permanent. After guardianship, we can sell before winter. The sentence sat there without apology, without confusion, without any hint that it had been written in anger. It sounded like planning, like logistics, like people discussing furniture delivery dates. Mr. Weber returned her call less than 20 minutes after she emailed him the images. Do not respond to anyone, he said immediately. I wasn't planning to. Good. Save the original photographs. Email copies to yourself. Print everything. Keep the tablet exactly as it is. Miriam looked at the device on the kitchen table. You think they'll deny it? I think they'll deny everything. His answer was calm enough to be believable. What does this change? It changes motive. Miriam swallowed. The wedding comment? Yes. Mr. Weber paused. That line concerns me almost as much as the house. She understood why. The money mattered, the property mattered, but the wedding had never been about a wedding. It had been a test. Lena had written it herself. The wedding proved she'll accept humiliation if Max stays quiet, not tolerate, not survive. Accept. Miriam thanked him and ended the call. Then she sat alone in the quiet house. For nearly an hour she did nothing except organize papers, bank records, transfer receipts, text messages, screenshots, attorney notes. The stack kept growing. At some point it stopped feeling like a collection of misunderstandings. It started looking like a case file. That realization hurt more than any single piece of evidence. Near sunset her phone buzzed. Max. She stared at the screen before answering. Hi, Mom. His voice sounded normal, almost cheerful. For a moment she hated how effective that was. How are you? He asked. The question felt rehearsed. I'm fine. Good. Silence followed. Then he finally arrived at the reason for the call. Lena thinks things have gotten really tense. Miriam closed her eyes. Of course. She does? Yeah, another pause. We were hoping maybe everyone could sit down and talk. Everyone. Not apologize. Not explain. Talk. Miriam had started noticing how carefully they chose words. About what? Everything. That isn't specific. Max sighed. Mom, why are you doing this? The question landed harder than she expected. Not because it was cruel, because it was familiar. Every boundary she had ever set had eventually been framed as something she was doing to someone else. I didn't exclude myself from your wedding. The silence on the line stretched. When Max spoke again, his voice was tighter. We've already talked about that. No, Miriam said quietly. You talked. I listened. Mom, you let me buy a dress. He stopped. You let me ask about the date. Another silence. You let me find out from Lena. That's not fair. Miriam almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because fairness had suddenly become important to him. I have to go, she said. Mom, she ended the call. Her hands trembled afterward. Not from fear, from grief. Max had not asked whether she was hurt. He had asked why she was reacting. The difference felt enormous. That evening she changed passwords, every online account, bank access, insurance portals, email recovery settings, medical records, anything connected to her life. She wrote the new information in a notebook stored inside a locked cabinet. It took hours. When she finished, she felt exhausted and safer. The next morning brought another surprise. An email notification appeared from her bank. Nothing unusual, just a routine security alert. But the date attached to the inquiry caught her attention. The access request had occurred almost 3 weeks earlier, before the wedding. Miriam immediately called the bank manager she had spoken with before. After verifying her identity, he reviewed the account notes. Yes, he confirmed, that inquiry was made before your recent changes. What exactly did they ask? The manager chose his words carefully. I can tell you the questions involved account oversight procedures and situations involving diminished financial capacity. Miriam stared out her kitchen window. Before the wedding, before the rent argument, before she cut off support, before any of it. Who asked? I cannot discuss details beyond what was documented. Of course, she expected that. Still, she thanked him and ended the call. The timing was enough. The timeline had shifted. The pressure had not begun after she stopped paying rent. The pressure had started before the wedding even happened, which meant something else. The wedding itself had never caused the conflict. It had only revealed it. That afternoon, she drove to Mr. Weber's office. The attorney listened carefully while she explained the bank inquiry date. Then he walked to a whiteboard mounted beside his desk. For the first time, he began arranging events chronologically. The emergency transfer Lena requested, the venue payment, the secret wedding, the bank inquiry, the power of attorney paperwork, the calls to Dr. Morton, the wellness report, the guardianship email. Miriam watched quietly. One by one, the events stopped looking random. A shape emerged, not proof, not yet, but direction. Mr. Weber tapped the board. This is what concerns me. The timing, the preparation. Miriam felt cold. You think they've been planning this for months? I think they were discussing possibilities before you knew there was a problem. The room fell silent. Miriam looked at the board. Every item represented a memory, a conversation, a moment she had tried to excuse. Together they formed something harder to ignore. What should I do now? She asked. Keep documenting. That's all, for now. He sat down again. People who believe they are entitled to something often become impatient when access is threatened. Miriam understood. If Lena and Max truly believed her house would eventually solve their financial problems, losing control would make them nervous. Nervous people made mistakes. That evening, Miriam stopped by the grocery store on her way home. Near the checkout lane, she heard someone call her name. She turned. A woman in her late 50s approached carefully. After a second, Miriam recognized her, Patricia, an old friend of Lena's mother, someone she had met twice at family gatherings. It's been a while, Patricia said. It has. The woman looked uncomfortable almost immediately, like someone debating whether to say something. Finally, she leaned closer. I probably shouldn't get involved. Miriam's stomach tightened. But? Patricia hesitated. Lena's mother mentioned something a few months ago. A few months? Yes, before the wedding, before everything exploded. Miriam felt her pulse quicken. What did she say? Patricia glanced around the store. She was bragging. About what? She said Lena was finally getting things organized. Miriam said nothing. Patricia lowered her voice. She specifically mentioned your house. The words hit hard. What about my house? She said something like, once the paperwork is done, that place won't be sitting in an old woman's hands much longer. The fluorescent lights above suddenly felt too bright. When was this? Patricia looked genuinely troubled. Spring, I think. Months before the wedding, months before the first argument. Months before Miriam knew she was being excluded. Patricia touched her arm gently. I didn't understand what she meant at the time. Miriam forced herself to nod. Thank you for telling me. The woman looked relieved, then worried. Maybe it was nothing. Miriam already knew it wasn't. She drove home in silence. Inside, she immediately wrote down everything Patricia remembered. The location, the date estimate, the exact wording. Then she added it to the folder barely closed anymore. As she slipped the new notes inside, her phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number appeared. There was no greeting, no name, only a single photograph. Miriam opened it. Her breath stopped. It was a scanned document. Blurry. Incomplete. But one detail was perfectly visible. At the bottom of the page was her signature, or something that looked frighteningly close to it. Below the signature was a title she had never seen before, Property Transfer Authorization, and above the image, the anonymous sender had typed only 6 words, check county records before they do. Miriam barely slept. The anonymous message sat on her phone like a live wire. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the blurred signature again. It looked enough like her handwriting to unsettle her, but not enough to convince her. Whoever created that document had either copied her signature or traced it from something else. At 7 the next morning, she called Mr. Weber. For the first time since this ordeal began, she heard genuine urgency in his voice. "Do not contact Max or Lena," he said. "I wasn't planning to." "Good. Meet me at the county recorder's office." An hour later, they sat across from a records clerk reviewing publicly available property filings. Miriam felt strangely detached as document after document appeared on the screen. Nothing had been transferred. Not yet. The house was still solely in her name. For a brief moment she could breathe again. Then the clerk opened another filing. Mr. Weber leaned forward. "What is that?" The clerk adjusted her glasses. "It's not a transfer." Miriam's stomach tightened. "What is it?" "A preliminary information request." The document was dated nearly 5 months earlier. 5 months. Before the wedding, before the rent dispute, before the secret emails. The request wasn't enough to change ownership. It didn't grant authority. But it showed that someone had been gathering information about the property's title history and transfer requirements. "Who submitted it?" Mr. Weber asked. The clerk pointed to the name. Miriam felt the blood drain from her face. It wasn't Lena. It wasn't Max. It was an attorney she had never heard of. Mr. Weber photographed the screen. "Can we obtain a copy?" The clerk nodded. As paperwork was printed, Miriam sat quietly. Someone had been preparing for something months before she ever realized there was danger. The wedding had not started the plan. The wedding had happened in the middle of it. Outside the building, Mr. Weber reviewed the documents again. "This doesn't prove wrongdoing." "I know, but it proves preparation." Miriam stared at the attorney's name. "Could Lena have hired him? Possibly, Max. Possibly. What do we do now?" Mr. Weber folded the papers carefully. "We continue building the timeline." The word timeline had become increasingly important. Dates didn't lie, people did. Back home, Miriam created another folder, property records. Every document received its own scan. Every date went into a spreadsheet. Every conversation got written down. She was tired of relying on memory. Facts felt safer. That afternoon, Max called again. She considered letting it go to voicemail. Instead, she answered. "Mom," his voice sounded strained. "Hi, Max. Why were you at the county office today?" Miriam froze. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then she asked quietly, "How do you know I was there?" The silence answered before he did. "I just heard." Heard from who? Someone. Miriam felt something shift inside her. Not anger, certainty. The county office had not called him. Mr. Weber certainly hadn't. Which meant somebody connected to the inquiry was watching, or being updated. "Who told you?" she repeated. "Does it matter?" "Yes. Mom, you're making this bigger than it needs to be." There it was again. The familiar pattern. Whenever she discovered something real, the problem became her reaction, not the discovery itself. "You knew about the property inquiry. It wasn't a question." Max immediately answered. "No," too quickly. The denial arrived before thought. Miriam noticed. So did he. The silence afterward stretched. "Mom, don't lie to me. I am not lying." "You didn't even ask what inquiry." Another silence. This one was longer, more dangerous. Max finally exhaled. "Lena says you've become obsessed." Miriam almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. "Lena says a lot of things. She worries about you." "No," Miriam said softly. "She worries about losing access to me." The call ended minutes later. Neither convinced the other, but something important had happened. For the first time, Max sounded nervous, not defensive, nervous. Later that evening, Eleanor stopped by. The retired paralegal carried coffee and concern in equal measure. Miriam showed her the anonymous text. Eleanor studied it carefully. "Whoever sent this wanted to help or scare me. Both can be true." Miriam sat across from her. "I don't understand why someone wouldn't identify themselves. Because they may know Lena." The answer arrived immediately. Too immediately. Miriam looked up. "You think so?" "I think people stay anonymous when they're afraid of consequences." That possibility lingered after Eleanor left. If someone inside Lena's circle was leaking information, why now? What had changed? Around midnight, another answer arrived. Not complete, but enough. Miriam's phone buzzed with a social media notification. She rarely checked those platforms anymore. Tonight she opened it. A new post appeared on Lena's account. The smiling wedding photos were back. The expensive venue, the flowers, the guests, the people considered special. But the caption was different. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about marriage. It was about family, specifically difficult family. Lena never mentioned Miriam by name. She didn't need to. Some people try to control their adult children through money. Some people can't handle boundaries. Some people become bitter when life moves on without them. The comments appeared quickly. Most were sympathetic. A few weren't. One person asked why Miriam had been excluded. Another asked whether the rumors about financial support were true. Lena ignored those questions. Miriam took screenshots, then more screenshots, every comment, every timestamp. By 2 a.m, she had archived the entire thread. The next day brought a new problem. A certified letter arrived, not from a court, not from a lawyer, from a financial institution. Miriam opened it slowly. Inside was a notice regarding a credit inquiry. Her name appeared on the document, so did her address. But she had never requested credit, never applied for anything, never authorized a review. Mr. Weber received a copy within minutes. 2 hours later, he called. "I'm checking whether it's an error, and if it isn't..." His pause answered everything. Then someone may be testing information. Testing? Verifying identity details, address history, ownership records, things used during financial applications. Miriam sat very still. The walls of her home suddenly felt closer. The plan wasn't shrinking, it was expanding. By evening, she had contacted the credit bureau and placed additional alerts on her file. Another precaution. Another lock on another door. The process took hours. When she finally finished, she noticed a voicemail she had missed earlier. Unknown number. She almost deleted it. Instead, she pressed play. A male voice spoke quietly, distorted, deliberately hidden. "You don't know me," the message continued. "But if you want the truth, stop looking at the house." Miriam's pulse accelerated. "Look at the debt." The recording ended. That was all. No name, no explanation, nothing. She listened again, then a third time. Debt, not property, debt. The word changed everything. For weeks, she had assumed the house was the prize. What if the house was only the solution? What if something else existed beneath the surface? Something large enough that selling her home had become necessary. Something desperate enough to justify all of this. At nearly midnight, Miriam opened the folder labeled Max and Lena Support. Then she opened another. Bank transfers. For the first time, she stopped looking at what she had given them. Instead, she started looking for what they might have been hiding. 3 hours later, she found something she had somehow missed. A payment. Small, only $200, buried among dozens of transactions. But the memo line caught her attention immediately. Debt consolidation deposit. Miriam stared at the screen. She had never paid a debt consolidation company. She had never even heard the name listed beside the transfer. Yet the money had come from her account, and the transfer had occurred almost 6 months before the wedding. Exactly one day after Max told her he and Lena were finally getting ahead financially. She printed the page, then another, then another. By dawn, a new question had replaced every old one. What kind of debt had required them to start planning for her house long before they ever got married? Miriam watched the dawn spread across her kitchen window while the printer hummed behind her. The debt consolidation page slid out slowly, one clean sheet carrying one small transaction that suddenly felt enormous. $200, a deposit, 6 months before the wedding. One day after Max had told her he and Lena were finally getting ahead financially. She placed the page beside the anonymous voicemail transcript she had typed herself. Look at the debt. 4 words from a man who would not give his name, and now she understood why he had sounded afraid. Debt had a paper trail. Debt had collectors. Debt had consequences. And if Max and Lena were hiding something large enough, Miriam's house might not have been their dream. It might have been their escape plan. At 8:15, she called Mr. Weber. He listened without interrupting while she explained the debt consolidation payment, the voicemail, and the timing. When she finished, there was a pause on the line. "Do you recognize the company name?" "No. Do not call them again by yourself. Send me the information. I already printed it." "Good. Email me a copy. Also, Miriam, place a fraud alert if you haven't already." "I did." "Then we add this to the timeline." That word no longer comforted her. The timeline was becoming less like a tool and more like a map of betrayal. After sending the documents to Mr. Weber, Miriam opened her banking records again. She searched for the company name. Only one payment appeared. Then she searched Max's name, Lena's name, and vague memo terms she had ignored before. Adjustment, transfer support, emergency, reimbursement, personal. Most were familiar. One was not. A $600 transfer from the previous winner had been marked as apartment insurance help. Miriam remembered that request. Lena had said their renter's insurance was about to lapse and Max was embarrassed to ask. Miriam had paid immediately. But the receiving line attached to the ACH record showed a different merchant category. Legal services. Miriam sat back slowly. Legal services. 6 months before the wedding venue payment, around the same period as the debt consolidation deposit. Before Lena ever mentioned marriage plans becoming serious, she printed that page too. By noon, the folder had grown too thick for its clips. Miriam switched to a binder. She labeled dividers by category: banking, property, medical, communications, wedding, debt. The act of sorting steadied her hands. It gave shape to the chaos. She was no longer chasing every blow as it landed. She was building a wall with the pieces. Her phone buzzed while she was labeling the last section. Max. She let it go to voicemail. Then Lena called, then Max again, then a text arrived. Mom, please stop ignoring us. People are starting to ask questions because of Lena's post. We need to present a united family. A united family. Miriam stared at the phrase. They had excluded her from the wedding. Tried to walk into her home with a key. Prepared power of attorney papers. Reported her as unsafe. Discussed guardianship and selling her house. And now they wanted unity because outsiders were noticing. She screenshotted the message and filed it under communications. At 3 o'clock, Mr. Weber called back. I contacted the debt consolidation company through formal inquiry channels, he said. They won't disclose client details without proper authorization as expected. So we know nothing? We know the payment came from your account. That's enough to raise questions, but there's something else. Miriam gripped the phone. What? The legal services transfer you sent me. I recognized the firm. The room seemed to go quiet around her. It's connected to the attorney who filed the property information request. Miriam closed her eyes. The debt, the property inquiry, and the legal consultation were no longer separate pieces. They touched. They used my money to pay an attorney who looked into my house? Possibly. We need more confirmation. But the timing and vendor connection are concerning. Miriam sat down. For a moment she felt old in a way she usually refused to feel. Not weak, just tired. Tired of learning that each kindness had been turned into a tool against her. What do I do? Tonight, nothing, Mr. Weber said. Tomorrow we talk about a formal letter. For now, keep documenting. And Miriam? Yes? Do not meet them alone. She almost answered that she knew. Then she remembered all the years she had opened her door without thinking. All the times Max had entered with his own key, grabbed coffee from her kitchen, searched her drawers for tape or stamps or batteries. Love had made access feel harmless. Now access felt like risk. I won't, she said. That evening, a comment appeared beneath Lena's public post. Miriam had been checking only to archive updates, not to engage. Most comments were still vague sympathy from people who did not know the details. But one new comment stood out. Lena, maybe you should tell people who paid for the venue. The profile belonged to a woman named Rachel Donnelly. Miriam did not know her, but she recognized the last name from one of Lena's adult friends who had attended the wedding. Within minutes, the comment vanished. Miriam had already captured it. Then another comment appeared from the same account. Deleting comments won't delete receipts. That vanished too. Miriam took another screenshot. Her heart began to beat faster. Someone else knew, or suspected. She clicked the profile but did not message. Not yet. Mr. Weber had warned her not to chase anonymous information without caution. Still, the existence of another witness shifted something inside her. Lena's story was not as airtight as she believed. At 8:40 p.m., a message request appeared. Rachel Donnelly. Miriam opened it but did not accept immediately. The preview was visible. I was at the wedding. I think you need to know what Lena said that night. Miriam's hand hovered over the screen. Then she accepted. The full message appeared. I don't want drama, but this feels wrong. Lena joked during the reception that Max's mom was useful but exhausting, and that it was easier not having you there because old people make everything about themselves. A few people laughed. Max heard it, he didn't correct her. Miriam read the message once, then again. The words hurt, but not like before. This was not a fresh wound. It was confirmation of the wound she already carried. Useful, but exhausting. That was what her years of help had become. She saved the message, replied only with thank you, and forwarded a copy to Mr. Weber. Then another message arrived from Rachel. There's more. Lena's mother mentioned that night that once the house issue was settled, Max and Lena could finally breathe. I didn't know what she meant then. Miriam stopped breathing for a moment. The house issue. At the wedding reception, the night Miriam was not invited, while guests toasted and danced, they had already been discussing her home. She stood from the table and walked to the sink, gripping the edge until her dizziness passed. Anger did not come first, grief did. The deep, humiliating grief of realizing that people had gathered in celebration while she was being reduced to an obstacle. By 10 o'clock, she had printed Rachel's messages and added them to the binder. Wedding, property, witness. The categories connected now in ways no one could dismiss as coincidence. Near midnight, Miriam received a text from Lena. I know Rachel contacted you. She misunderstood everything. If you keep collecting gossip, you'll make yourself look unstable. Miriam stared at the message. Lena knew. That meant Rachel had either warned her, or Lena was monitoring the fallout more closely than she admitted. A second text followed. We're willing to forgive this if you come to dinner tomorrow and talk like family. Miriam almost deleted it. Then she stopped. The invitation was not kindness. It was a stage, a controlled room, a controlled audience, a chance for Lena to perform concern and push Miriam into looking unreasonable. But this time Miriam understood the performance before stepping into it. She saved the text, placed the phone on the table, and opened her notebook. Tomorrow dinner invitation from Lena, likely image control attempt. Then she wrote one more line beneath it. Do not go hoping for love, go only if prepared. Miriam closed the notebook after writing the final line. Do not go hoping for love, go only if prepared. She sat with those words for several minutes. They sounded harsh but not cruel. They were a warning to herself. For too long she had entered conversations with Max hoping the right sentence would bring back the son she missed. Lena understood that hope. She used it like a door handle. This time Miriam would not walk in empty-handed emotionally or legally. The next morning she called Mr. Weber before answering Lena's invitation. I don't recommend meeting them alone, he said. It's at their apartment. That makes it worse. I know, then don't go. Miriam looked toward the binder on her desk. If I refuse, they'll say I'm isolating myself again. They may say that anyway. That was true. Lena had already turned locked doors into paranoia and financial boundaries into irrational decisions. Refusal could be used against her, attendance could be staged against her. There was no safe choice anymore, only careful ones. What if I go to a public place instead? Miriam asked. That would be better. Text the condition. Keep it written. Don't discuss finances since stating your boundary. Leave if they pressure you. Miriam wrote every instruction down. After the call, she texted Lena, I will meet for dinner only at a public restaurant. I will not discuss signing financial documents. I will not resume rent payments. If the conversation becomes pressure or accusation, I will leave. The reply came almost immediately. That sounds very cold, Miriam. Families don't negotiate like lawyers. Miriam saved the message, then she answered, These are my conditions. Lena did not respond for nearly an hour. When she finally did, the message named a restaurant downtown and a time. Miriam recognized the place. Quiet, respectable, not too expensive. It also happened to be where Lena liked to run into people she knew. Miriam understood that instantly. A stage, then. Fine. She dressed carefully that evening. Not formally, not timidly. A navy blouse, gray slacks, low heels, pearl earrings her husband had given her years ago. She placed her phone in her purse with the recording shortcut ready, though she would follow Mr. Weber's caution and not rely on it unless necessary. More importantly, she carried a small notepad and a steady resolve. When she entered the restaurant, she saw Max first. He stood near the table, looking tired and uncomfortable. Lena sat beside him, perfectly composed in a cream sweater and gold necklace. Two other adults were present, Lena's mother, Carol Schuster, and Carol's friend Patricia, the same woman who had warned Miriam in the grocery store. Miriam stopped. Lena smiled brightly, too brightly. We thought it would help to have witnesses, she said. Miriam looked at Patricia, whose face had gone pale. Witnesses to what? To a healing conversation, Lena replied. Max rubbed the back of his neck. Mom, please, just sit down. Miriam considered leaving immediately. Then she saw Patricia lower her eyes, ashamed. That changed her mind. If Lena wanted an audience, Miriam would not give her the performance she expected. She sat. The first 15 minutes were polite enough to be almost insulting. Lena asked about Miriam's health in a careful voice. Carol Schuster said family conflicts could get out of hand when older people felt forgotten. Max said very little. Patricia kept her hands folded tightly in her lap and did not touch her water glass. Then Lena lifted her wine. I want to say something, she said. Miriam felt the table shift around those words. Lena turned slightly, as if addressing more than just the people seated there. Max and I love you, Miriam. We have only ever wanted what was best for you. If the wedding hurt your feelings, we are sorry. But we also need you to understand that punishing us financially has been devastating. There it was, a toast dressed as an apology. Miriam did not reach for her glass. Lena continued, family should not be about money. The sentence was so absurd that Miriam almost smiled. No, Miriam said softly, it shouldn't. Lena seemed encouraged. Exactly, so maybe tonight we can agree to move forward. No more lawyers, no more screenshots, no more making private matters public. I have not made anything public. Carol Schuster tilted her head. People are talking. Because Lena posted about me. Lena's smile tightened. I did not name you. You didn't have to. Max leaned forward. Mom, please. Miriam turned to him. Please what? Please stop keeping score. The words hurt because they sounded like something he truly believed. Not evidence, scorekeeping, not boundaries. Punishment. I kept receipts because your wife used my money for a wedding I was not invited to. Lena set her glass down. That was a gift. It was requested as an emergency. Carol gave a soft sigh. Miriam, sometimes older parents become very attached to helping. Then when adult children start building their own lives, it can feel like rejection. Miriam looked at her calmly. Your daughter excluded me from my son's wedding while accepting my money. Patricia looked down at the table. The silence that followed was the first honest thing that had happened all evening. Max finally spoke. We made mistakes. Miriam's heart responded before her mind could stop it. That small sentence still had power. She hated that it did. Then he continued. But you cutting us off like this isn't fair either. The rent, the credit payments, the legal mess. We need time. The softness left her. Legal mess? Max froze. Lena touched his arm under the table, but Miriam saw it. What legal mess, Max? He looked away. Nothing. I just mean everything. No, Miriam said. You said legal mess. Lena leaned forward, her voice low. This is exactly why we were worried. You seize on words and build stories around them. Miriam opened her purse, took out a $20 bill, and placed it beside her untouched water. I said I would leave if this became pressure. Lena's expression changed. For the first time that night, irritation broke through the polish. So that's it? You come here acting superior, refuse to forgive, and walk out? Miriam stood. No. I came here to see whether anyone at this table would tell the truth. Max stood too. Mom. She looked at him, really looked. For a second, all the anger fell away and only grief remained. I needed you to be my son before you were her husband in this, she said. You chose silence. His face changed. But he said nothing. Again. Miriam turned to leave. Behind her, Lena's voice sharpened just enough to carry. This is why people think you're unstable. Miriam stopped near the aisle. Several nearby diners glanced over. Lena realized too late that she had spoken louder than intended. Miriam turned back slowly. People, she said, or you? No one answered. She walked out before her hands could shake. In the parking lot, cold air hit her face. She sat in her car and wrote everything down while it was fresh. Who was present? What was said? Max's mention of a legal mess. Lena's accusation. Carol's framing, Patricia's silence. Just as she finished, someone tapped gently on her passenger window. Miriam startled. It was Patricia. Miriam unlocked the door and Patricia slipped into the passenger seat, trembling. I'm sorry, Patricia whispered. Miriam said nothing. Patricia pressed a folded napkin into her hand. I didn't know she was going to do that tonight. Miriam opened the napkin. Inside was a name and phone number. Below it, Patricia had written 3 words, Lena's debt attorney. Miriam looked up. Patricia's eyes were wet. She's lying to all of you, Patricia said, and whatever she owes, it's bigger than Max knows. Patricia stayed in the passenger seat for less than 5 minutes, but by the time she stepped out of Miriam's car, the evening had become something entirely different. Miriam held the folded napkin in her hand while Patricia spoke. I shouldn't even be telling you this, Patricia said. Lena would never forgive me. Then why are you? Patricia looked back toward the restaurant windows. Because I've watched this go too far. Her voice trembled. I don't know everything. I only know pieces. But Lena has been meeting with that attorney for months. Not weeks, months. Miriam felt something cold settle inside her chest. About what? I don't know, she never says. But I heard enough conversations to know she's terrified about money. That's not unusual. No, Patricia agreed. But hiding it from her husband is. The words hung between them. Patricia opened the car door. One more thing. Miriam waited. Whatever Lena told Max about you, I don't think he knows he's being manipulated. I think he believes it. Then Patricia left. Miriam sat alone for several minutes after she drove away. That hurt more than the attorney. The possibility that Max wasn't protecting Lena despite knowing the truth. The possibility that he genuinely believed the version of Miriam that Lena had spent years constructing. Controlling, unstable, manipulative, financially vindictive. The realization felt like another loss. Not because it excused him, because it explained him. When she arrived home, she immediately scanned the napkin and saved copies to multiple locations. Then she added a new section to her binder. Attorney reference, Patricia's statement, restaurant incident, Max's legal comment. She documented everything while details remained fresh. Only after midnight did she finally sleep. The next morning she called Mr. Weber. The attorney listened carefully. An attorney's name alone doesn't prove anything, he said. I know, but it gives us a direction. Can we contact him? No. Miriam frowned. Why not? Because he represents someone else. He won't discuss a client. The answer made sense. It was also frustrating. So we wait? No, Weber said. We verify. That single word steadied her. Verify, not assume, not react. Verify. By afternoon, Miriam found herself sitting in front of her laptop reviewing months of documents again. This time she searched differently. Not for large transactions, not for obvious theft. For patterns. Lena was careful. Miriam knew that now. People who planned manipulation rarely left giant footprints. They left trails. The first trails appeared in a stack of emails. Several months before the wedding, Lena had suddenly become very interested in Miriam's estate planning. At the time, the conversations had seemed harmless. Have you updated your will? Do you have a medical directive? Who handles things if you get sick again? Normal questions. Reasonable questions. But when Miriam lined up the dates beside other events, something changed. The questions had started only days after her surgery complications. Only days after doctors had warned that recovery might take longer than expected. Lena had not become concerned when Miriam was healthy. She became interested when Miriam was vulnerable. Miriam highlighted the dates. Then she found something else. An email from nearly 8 months earlier. Short, easy to overlook. At the time, she barely remembered receiving it. Lena had forwarded the contact information of an estate planning firm, just in case. No explanation, no context. Miriam stared at the screen. The timing bothered her. 8 months before the wedding. Long before any major conflict. Long before Miriam stopped helping financially. Why had Lena already been steering conversations toward wills and legal authority? The question sat heavily in her mind. By evening, she had another call scheduled with Mr. Weber. He reviewed the timeline carefully. I'm interested in this, he said. The will discussions, the timing. Do you think she planned everything? No. The answer surprised her. No? Planning and opportunity are different things. People sometimes discover opportunities and then build plans around them. Miriam understood exactly what he meant. The distinction mattered. Maybe Lena had not entered the family with a scheme. Maybe the scheme developed later. That possibility somehow felt worse, because it meant greed had grown gradually inside ordinary moments. Should I confront Max? No. The answer came immediately. Why? Because if there is hidden debt, hidden legal preparation, or hidden financial pressure, confrontation gives them time. Miriam hated hearing that. Yet she knew he was right. For months she had reacted emotionally. Now, every instinct told her to move carefully. Before ending the call, Weber asked a question. Have you checked your credit recently? Miriam blinked. My credit? Yes. Why? Because people concerned about access sometimes explore options before acting. The room suddenly felt smaller. After hanging up, she logged into her accounts. The report loaded slowly. Nothing unusual appeared at first. No loans, no credit cards she didn't recognize, no obvious fraud. Then she noticed something strange. 3 separate inquiries, hard inquiries, all from the same period. Several months ago, around the time of her surgery recovery, Miriam sat up straighter. She had not applied for credit. She had not requested financing. She had not authorized anything. Her pulse accelerated. She clicked through details. One inquiry belonged to a regional bank. Another came from a lending institution. The third was connected to a mortgage services company. Mortgage. The word made her stomach tighten. She immediately printed everything. Then she called the reporting agency. The representative could not explain who had initiated the inquiries but confirmed the dates. Real inquiries. Not errors, not duplicates. Real. When the call ended, Miriam stared at the papers spread across her kitchen table. A mortgage company. Months ago, during her recovery. Before the wedding. Before the financial cutoff. Before the public conflict. The timeline no longer felt random. Someone had been looking at something. The question was what and why. Her phone buzzed. Max. The first direct call from him in nearly 2 weeks. Miriam watched it ring, then answered. Hello. His voice sounded exhausted. Mom. She waited. I heard Patricia talk to you. Of course Lena had noticed. What about it? She shouldn't have gotten involved. Miriam felt a quiet anger rising. Neither should I have been discussed at dinner. Silence. Then a sigh. Can we not do this? There it was again, the familiar request to skip over the damage and focus on peace, the version of peace that always required her surrender. No, Miriam said. Another silence. Then Max spoke carefully. Lena is under a lot of stress. Because of debt, the line went completely quiet, not denial, not confusion, silence. Miriam's grip tightened around the phone. Max, I can't talk about this. Why not? Another pause, longer this time. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded defeated, because I don't know what's true anymore. The admission struck harder than any argument. For the first time, Max sounded frightened, not defensive, not angry, afraid. Then find out, Miriam said quietly. The call ended minutes later without resolution. But something had shifted. For the first time, she sensed a crack in whatever story Lena had built around him. Not enough, but something. Near midnight, Miriam received an email notification. A new message had arrived through her online property records alert system. Months earlier, after Mr. Weber's recommendation, she had enabled notifications for any activity connected to her property records. Most alerts were routine. Public database updates, administrative filings, nothing important. This one felt different immediately. The timestamps showed activity from nearly 6 months ago. Recently digitized records, recently indexed, not recently created. Miriam opened the attachment. Her eyes moved down the page, then stopped. A property-related authorization request, never completed, never approved, but partially filled out. The document contained her name, her address, her property information. And in the signature section sat an incomplete handwritten attempt, a signature that looked disturbingly similar to hers, but wasn't. Miriam stared at it. Someone had practiced, someone had tried, and judging from the date, they had started long before the wedding was ever announced. Miriam did not sleep. The document remained open on her laptop long after midnight. Every few minutes she zoomed in on the signature area again, hoping distance or magnification would change what she saw. It never did. The handwriting was not hers, yet it was close enough to make her stomach tighten. Someone had practiced her signature, not successfully, not completely, but deliberately. That distinction mattered. A forged document could be explained away as fraud from a stranger. Practice suggested something else. It suggested preparation. By dawn, she had already saved multiple copies of the record and added another section to her binder. Property authorization attempt, incomplete signature, date 6 months earlier, potential connection to mortgage inquiry, potential connection to recovery period. The timeline was becoming impossible to ignore. At 8:30 that morning, she was sitting across from Mr. Weber. For several minutes, he reviewed the document without speaking. Finally, he set it down. This is concerning. The understatement almost made Miriam laugh. Concerning? It is not proof of fraud, I know, but it is evidence of interest. He tapped the page. Someone's explored a process involving your property. Miriam folded her arms. Can we find out who submitted it? Possibly. Possibly? Property systems vary. Some records leave trails, some don't. We need requests, not assumptions. The answer frustrated her, but she understood. Facts first, always facts. Weber leaned back. I want you to do something. What? Make a complete inventory of what? Everything. Miriam frowned. Your accounts, property records, insurance, medical directives, beneficiary designations, password recovery contacts, emergency contacts, anything someone could potentially access or influence. The list seemed to... That's going to take days. Good, Weber said. The answer surprised her. Good? Yes, because while you're verifying, you're also protecting. For the first time in weeks, Miriam felt something unfamiliar. Control, not complete control, but enough to breathe. The next several days became a quiet campaign. She changed passwords, she updated recovery contacts, she removed outdated authorizations, she ordered official copies of important records, she rented a secure safe deposit box. Each task felt small. Together, they felt like rebuilding a wall. The work also revealed something painful. Several emergency contacts still listed Max, not because she trusted him less than before, because she no longer knew who had access to information through him. That realization hurt more than she expected. She stared at his name on one form for nearly 10 minutes before replacing it. Not with anger, with grief. The loss felt official somehow, as if ink could acknowledge what words could not. 3 days later, another surprise arrived. Patricia called. Miriam almost didn't answer. When she did, Patricia sounded nervous. I need to tell you something. What happened? Carol found out. I spoke to you. Miriam closed her eyes. Of course she had. How? I don't know. But Lena knows too. The tension in Patricia's voice was unmistakable. What did they say? Patricia hesitated. Lena said you're building a case. Miriam felt a chill. A case? Those were her words. Interesting. Not misunderstanding. Not disagreement. A case. The language of someone already thinking about legal exposure. What else? Patricia lowered her voice. I heard them talking yesterday. Miriam sat forward. Talking about what? You. Who? Lena and her mother. Patricia stopped, then continued carefully. I only caught part of it. Tell me anyway. Another pause. Then Patricia repeated the words exactly. Lena said, if she keeps digging, everything falls apart. The room seemed to go silent around Miriam. What falls apart? I don't know. Did Carol answer? Yes. Patricia swallowed. She asked whether Max knew. Miriam's pulse accelerated, and Lena said not yet. The call ended shortly afterward. Patricia knew nothing else, no details, no explanation, only fragments, yet the fragments changed everything. Not yet. The The phrase echoed through Miriam's mind all afternoon. Not yet, which meant there was something Max didn't know, something important enough to threaten everything, something Lena was actively hiding. That evening, Miriam made another discovery, not because she found new evidence, because she revisited old evidence, the wedding payments. Months ago, she had focused on the transfers themselves. Now she focused on timing. She built a spreadsheet, dates, amounts, messages, requests, patterns, and suddenly one detail stood out. A large transfer had occurred only 48 hours after Lena claimed a vendor demanded immediate payment. At the time, Miriam had believed her. The wedding deadline sounded urgent. Now she searched old emails. No vendor invoice existed. No contract, no receipt, nothing, just Lena's text message. "We're short and they need payment immediately. Please help." Miriam stared at the screen. Then she searched further. 3 days after receiving Miriam's money, Lena had posted photographs from a luxury resort weekend. The trip had never registered before. People traveled, people celebrated engagements. Nothing unusual, except the dates matched perfectly. Miriam printed everything. Again, it wasn't proof, but it was another crack, another inconsistency, another lie that could be checked. By Friday afternoon, the pressure arrived from a different direction. Max appeared at her front door, unannounced. Miriam almost didn't open it. When she did, he looked exhausted, older somehow. The confidence Lena often supplied him seemed absent. "Can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat in the living room where he had once spent countless evenings as a young man. Now the distance between them felt enormous. Neither spoke immediately. Finally, Max broke the silence. "Lena says you're investigating her." Miriam looked at him. "I'm protecting myself." "From what?" The question sounded genuine. That frightened her more than anger would have. "Max," she said quietly, "did you know there were mortgage-related inquiries connected to my information months ago?" His confusion appeared instant. "No." "Did you know someone submitted paperwork involving my property?" "No." "Did you know Lena has been meeting with an attorney for months?" The hesitation came this time. Small, but visible, Miriam noticed. "You knew that, sort of. What does that mean?" She said it was debt counseling. There it was, another piece. Not proof of story. Perhaps true, perhaps not. "Did she tell you whose debt?" Max looked away. "No." The answer settled heavily between them. Miriam steadied her son. For the first time, she saw something she had missed before. Fear, not fear of her, fear of discovering something. Fear of asking questions he wasn't ready to hear answered. "You don't trust her completely anymore." It wasn't a question. Max didn't respond. That response was answer enough. Minutes later, he left. The conversation resolved nothing, yet it changed the balance, because now Miriam knew she wasn't the only one doubting. That evening, as she organized her notes, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, she answered. "Hello?" A man's voice responded. "Mrs. Caldwell, yes. My name is Richard Gaines." The name meant nothing. "We haven't met," he continued. "But I believe you've recently become interested in some matters involving Lena Caldwell." Miriam's entire body stiffened. "How do you know that?" A pause. "Then, because she was my client." The room went completely still. Miriam stood slowly from her chair. "Was?" "Yes. What kind of client?" Another silence, long enough to be deliberate. When Richard Gaines finally spoke, his voice was calm. "Mrs. Caldwell, before I answer that question, there's something you need to know." Miriam tightened her grip on the phone. "What?" The man's next sentence made her blood run cold. "The property authorization document you found wasn't the first one." Miriam stood beside her desk with the phone pressed tightly to her ear. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. "The property authorization document wasn't the first one," Richard Gaines said again. Her free hand moved to the edge of the desk, steadying herself. "What do you mean?" "I mean there were earlier drafts." Miriam closed her eyes. Drafts, plural. The word made the room tilt. "Who are you?" she asked. "I told you. My name is Richard Gaines. You said Lena was your client." "She was. Briefly. What kind of attorney are you?" "I handle debt negotiation and some asset protection matters." "Asset protection." Miriam hated how clean the phrase sounded. "Why are you calling me?" A pause followed. Not hesitation exactly. Caution. "Because I withdrew from representing her after I became concerned about the source and purpose of certain documents she provided." Miriam looked toward the binder on her desk. "What documents?" "I can't disclose privileged communications." "Then why call me at all?" "Because I am allowed to warn a person if I reasonably believe my services or materials may be used to further a fraud." "I'm choosing my words carefully, Mrs. Caldwell." Miriam stayed silent. The name was still wrong. Caldwell. He had used it twice now. "My name is Miriam Hale." Another pause. This one was different. Gaines exhaled quietly. "That is important." "Why?" "The documents Lena brought me used Caldwell." Miriam's grip tightened. That's not my name. I understand that now. Cold moved through her body. What exactly did those documents say? I cannot send you client files without proper process. But I can tell you this. You need your attorney to request records tied to variations of your name. Hale, Caldwell, and any prior married or maiden names. Miriam Caldwell was my maiden name, she said slowly. A name she had not used in decades, a name Lena had no reason to use. Except in old records, except in estate documents, except in places Miriam had forgotten, Gaines continued. I ended representation after I asked for identification and authorization documentation that never satisfied me. What was Lena trying to do? I cannot characterize her intent. The careful wording frustrated Miriam, but she recognized caution when she heard it. Then tell me what you can say. She claimed she was helping an elderly relative organize property documents due to declining health and confusion. Miriam's stomach dropped. Declining health, confusion, the same language, again and again, a constructed story. Did she mention Max? Yes. How? She said her husband was overwhelmed and that she was handling paperwork for the family. Miriam's throat tightened. For the family. That phrase had hidden so much. Gaines lowered his voice. Mrs. Hale, if your attorney contacts me, I will respond appropriately through formal channels. I should not say more tonight. Wait. He paused. Was there a signature? On at least one draft, yes. Mine? I had concerns. That isn't an answer. It is the only answer I can give you directly. The call ended less than a minute later. Miriam remained standing in the dark office until the phone screen dimmed. Then she moved, not quickly, carefully. She wrote everything down, exact time of call, caller name, phone number, use of Caldwell, debt negotiation, asset protection, earlier drafts, declining health, confusion, signature concern. She did not trust memory anymore. Memory could be challenged. Paper was harder to bend. At 11:42 p.m., she emailed Mr. Weber, urgent. Attorney Richard Gaines called. Possible prior documents using maiden name Caldwell. Possible signature issue. She attached her notes and the call log's screenshot. Then she placed her phone on the desk and finally allowed herself to sit. The house was silent, but Miriam no longer felt watched. She felt hunted through paperwork. The next morning, Mr. Weber called before 8. I've already searched Richard Gaines, he said. And he's real. Debt negotiation, small firm, no obvious disciplinary issues. That relieved her more than she expected. What now? I'll contact him formally. Can he help? He may be limited by privilege, but fraud concerns changed the terrain. Carefully, Miriam stared at the binder. There are earlier drafts. I know. With my maiden name. That suggests someone searched old records or had access to my files. Neither spoke for a second. Miriam thought of Max helping her after surgery, Lena bringing soup, then later offering to organize the study because papers made Miriam anxious. At the time, it had seemed thoughtful. Lena had spent nearly an hour alone near the filing cabinet while Miriam rested in the recliner. Miriam felt sick. She was in my office, she said. When? After my surgery. More than once. Write that down, I will. Also check whether any old IDs, tax records, or estate papers are missing. Miriam spent the next 3 hours going through her office. Drawer by drawer, folder by folder. At first, nothing seemed missing. Then she opened the back section of the estate file. The photocopy of her old driver's license was gone. So was one page from an old tax packet where her maiden name appeared. Not the entire packet, just the identifying page. Small removals, easy to miss, practical. She sat on the floor surrounded by folders, her hands cold. There was no dramatic mess, no broken drawer, no obvious theft. That was what made it worse. Someone had known exactly what to take and exactly how little to disturb. She photographed the file gaps and wrote detailed notes. Then she called Mr. Weber again. This is becoming more serious, he said. I know. Do not accuse them directly. I won't. Good. We may need to prepare for them to escalate once they realize you're no longer isolated. That sentence stayed with her. No longer isolated. For weeks, Miriam had thought her strength came from organizing documents. But maybe the real shift was that other people now knew Mr. Weber, Dr. Morton, Carolyn at the bank, Sandra Price, Patricia, Rachel. Even Max, in some half-terrified way, knew something was wrong. Lena could still lie, but she could no longer count on silence. That afternoon, Miriam received a formal email from Dr. Morton's office. The letter was ready. She printed it immediately. The language was plain and powerful. Based on current examination and treatment history, Miriam Hale demonstrated intact cognitive function and no observed impairment, preventing independent decision-making. Miriam read that sentence 5 times, not because she doubted herself, because someone official had written what her family was trying to erase. She placed the medical letter in the binder. Then she made another decision. She called a home security company. Not because she wanted cameras, because she wanted records. The appointment was set for the following morning. At 6 that evening, Max came again. This time he knocked. Miriam looked through the peephole and saw him standing alone on the porch. No Lena, no folder, just Max. She opened the door but kept the chain in place. He looked at it and winced. "Mom, what do you need?" He swallowed. "I need to know what you found." Miriam studied him. His eyes were red. He had either not slept or had been crying. Maybe both. "I'm not discussing evidence with you." Evidence? The word frightened him. "Good, maybe it should." "Miriam," he said, then corrected himself. "Mom, please." She almost opened the chain. Almost. Then she remembered the missing photocopy, the practice signature, the word guardianship. "No," she said softly. Max pressed his hand against the doorframe. "She told me it was debt counseling." Miriam did not move. "She told me she was trying to protect us from lawsuits." Still Miriam said nothing. "She said you'd promise to help with the house someday." Miriam's breath caught. There it was, another lie. "I never promised that." Max closed his eyes. For the first time, he looked like a man hearing a floor crack beneath him. "I don't know what to believe." Miriam's voice was quiet. "Then start with what you can prove." He looked at her through the narrow opening. Before he could answer, a car pulled up behind him, Lena's car. Max turned sharply. Lena stepped out before the engine was fully quiet. Her face changed the second she saw him at Miriam's door. Not surprise. "Anger, you came here without me," she said. Max froze. Miriam watched from behind the chain as Lena walked up the path, holding her phone in one hand. Then Lena looked straight at Miriam and smiled. A small smile. Controlled. "Dangerous. I'm glad you're both here," she said. "Because tomorrow this stops being a family disagreement." Max went pale. Miriam tightened her grip on the door. "What does that mean?" Lena lifted her phone slightly. "It means the petition is ready." Miriam did not move. The chain lock remained between her and the two people standing on her porch, but for the first time it did not feel like enough. Lena stood behind Max with her phone lifted in one hand, calm and almost satisfied. Max looked as if the air had been knocked out of him. "The petition?" Miriam asked. Lena's smile did not reach her eyes. "For emergency guardianship," she said. "Since you refuse help, refuse family contact, hide behind lawyers, and make irrational financial decisions, we had no choice." Max turned toward her. "Lena, you said we were just preparing options." "We are past options," Lena said without looking at him. That sentence told Miriam more than Lena intended. Max had not known the petition was ready, or at least he had not known Lena planned to use it this soon. Miriam kept her voice steady. "Leave my property." Lena's expression tightened. "You should think carefully before making yourself look worse." "I said leave." Max looked at Miriam through the narrow opening. For a moment he seemed lost between the two women. Then he stepped down from the porch first. Lena did not move immediately. She leaned closer to the door. "You could have avoided all of this by being reasonable," she said. Miriam looked at her phone, then back at Lena. "This conversation is being documented." The smile vanished. Lena stepped back. When their car finally pulled away, Miriam closed the door and locked it fully. Her legs felt weak, but she did not sit down. She walked straight to her office, opened her binder, and wrote down every word she remembered. Then she emailed Mr. Weber. "Petition for emergency guardianship threatened tonight. Lena said it is ready." Max appeared unaware. She attached the audio from the doorbell camera because the security system had been installed that morning. Lena had chosen the wrong day to threaten her on the porch. "Mr. Weber called within 10 minutes. Did she serve you with anything?" "No." "Then we wait for formal notice." "Do not call them. Do not respond to texts unless I review them first." Max didn't seem to know. That may matter later. For now, assume they will move quickly. Miriam looked across her desk at the binder. "What do I do? You prepare." The next morning, the formal papers arrived by courier. Even though Miriam had expected them, seeing her name printed at the top of a guardianship petition made her hands go cold. The petition claimed she had become paranoid, financially reckless, socially isolated, and vulnerable to outside influence. It mentioned her decision to stop paying Max and Lena's rent as proof of sudden irrational behavior. It mentioned the changed locks, the attorney, the refusal to open her door, the wellness visit, the medical concerns. Every boundary had been turned into evidence against her. She read the petition twice. Then she saw Max's signature, not Lena's, Max's. Miriam lowered the papers to the desk. For several seconds she could not breathe properly. She had expected Lena's name. She had expected manipulation, distortion, even cruelty, but Max's signature made the betrayal official. Not emotional, not implied, ink on paper. Her son had asked a court to question her right to control her own life. She did not cry, not then. She scanned every page and sent it to Mr. Weber. By noon, she was in his office. He had already marked the petition with sticky notes. "They are requesting temporary financial authority pending review," he said. "Can they get it?" "Not automatically. They have to show urgency. They'll say I'm unsafe. They already did." Miriam sat straighter. "Then we answer." For the next 2 hours, they organized her defense, Dr. Morton's letter, the cognitive screening, bank records, removed access logs, the blocked login, the power of attorney form dated before the wedding, the venue payment, the guardianship email preview, property filings, the incomplete signature attempt, Lena's public post, Rachel's wedding messages, Patricia's statement, Richard Gaines' call notes. Piece by piece, Miriam watched the narrative change, not an unstable woman rejecting loving family. A competent woman resisting coordinated financial pressure. Mr. Weber filed an objection that afternoon. He also requested a hearing and submitted preliminary documentation showing Miriam's competence and the financial motive behind the petition. Nothing happened instantly. There was no dramatic court order, no sudden punishment, no quick victory. But a date was set, 2 weeks. Miriam had 2 weeks to prepare for strangers to decide whether she was still allowed to be the authority in her own life. That evening, Max texted, "Mom, I didn't know she was filing today." Miriam stared at it. For a long time, she wanted to answer. She wanted to ask why his signature was on the petition. She wanted to ask whether Lena had lied to him or whether he had lied to himself because it was easier. She wanted to ask when he had stopped seeing her as his mother and started seeing her as an obstacle. Instead, she forwarded the message to Mr. Weber. Then she placed the phone down. The next day, Eleanor came over. Miriam had not planned to involve her more deeply, but Eleanor had worked as a paralegal for years, and she understood records better than most people. She sat at Miriam's table and reviewed the timeline quietly. When she finished, she looked up. "You need witnesses. I have documents. You need both." Miriam nodded slowly. "Will you testify about what you saw?" Eleanor held her gaze. "Yes." That one word warmed something in Miriam's chest. Not happiness, not relief, something steadier, support. For so long, Lena had counted on Miriam being embarrassed, isolated, and too wounded to speak clearly. But Miriam was no longer alone at her kitchen table with a folder of confusing papers. She had a lawyer, a doctor's letter, a bank manager's records, neighbors who had seen the visits, and witnesses from the wedding Lena had tried to control. Late that night, another envelope appeared in Miriam's mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single printed page. A settlement proposal. Miriam read it once, then again. Max and Lena would withdraw the petition if Miriam agreed to resume rent assistance for 6 months, pay part of their legal expenses, stop harassing Lena's acquaintances, and sign a written promise not to alter her will or remove Max from any future inheritance. At the bottom, someone had typed, "Family access may resume after trust is restored." Miriam sat very still. There it was, finally written plainly. Love in exchange for money. Contact in exchange for compliance. Family as a service she was expected to purchase. She scanned the page, printed copies, added it to the binder, sent it to Mr. Weber. Then she opened a fresh sheet of paper and wrote only one sentence. "I will not buy my son back." The hearing lasted less than 3 hours. For months, Miriam had imagined dramatic confrontations, raised voices, and some perfect moment when every lie would collapse at once. Reality was quieter. The judge listened. Documents were reviewed. Questions were asked. Facts mattered more than emotion. Mr. Weber presented the medical evaluations first. Dr. Morton's cognitive assessment showed no impairment. The independent screening confirmed it. Then came the bank records, the unauthorized access attempts, the power of attorney draft dated before the wedding, and the documentation showing efforts to obtain control over Miriam's finances. The doorbell recording was played. Lena's voice carried clearly through the room. "The petition is ready." The settlement proposal followed. The demand for rent assistance, the request that Miriam promise not to alter her estate, the condition that family contact would resume only after compliance. Each document by itself might have been explained away. Together they painted a picture, not concern, control, not protection, access. When Richard Gaines testified remotely, the final pieces fell into place. He explained, carefully and professionally, why he had withdrawn from involvement after concerns arose regarding identification documents and representations made about Miriam's condition. He did not accuse, he did not speculate, he simply described what happened. That was enough. The petition for guardianship was denied. The temporary authority request was denied. The court made no sweeping declarations about family loyalty or morality. It simply ruled that Miriam remained fully capable of managing her own affairs, exactly as she had always been. As people filed out, Lena left first. Her expression was rigid. No dramatic breakdown, no apology, just someone realizing a door had closed. Permanently, Max remained behind. He stood near the hallway outside the courtroom while Miriam spoke quietly with Mr. Weber. For a moment, she considered walking away. Then she remembered something painful. For months, she had fought to keep control of her life. Not to avoid difficult conversations, to choose them. "I'd like a few minutes," she told her attorney. Mr. Weber nodded. "Call if you need me." They met 3 days later at a small cafe near the river. Public place, daylight, boundaries. Miriam arrived first. When Max walked in, he looked older than he had 6 months earlier. Not physically, emotionally. Like someone finally carrying the full weight of his own decisions. He sat across from her. Neither spoke immediately. Then Max looked down at his hands. "I'm sorry," the words were simple, not polished, not prepared. Miriam waited. "I should have listened sooner," he said. "I kept telling myself Lena knew more than I did. Then I kept telling myself things weren't that serious. Then I kept telling myself we were helping." His voice cracked. "And every time I ignored something, it got worse." Miriam stirred her coffee slowly. "I know." Max nodded. Tears filled his eyes but did not fall. "When I saw my signature in that petition after the hearing file was released, I realized something." "What?" "I stopped asking whether things were true." Miriam looked out the window. Cars moved along the street. People carried groceries. Life continued. The world had not stopped because her family had broken. "I was afraid," Max said quietly. "Of what?" "Debt. Failure. Losing the house. Looking like I couldn't provide." The honesty surprised her. Not because it excused anything. Because it sounded real. For once. Lena kept saying we deserved help. Miriam met his eyes. "Help isn't ownership, I know." Silence settled between them. Not comfortable, not hostile, just honest. Finally, Max asked the question he had clearly carried for days. Can this relationship be repaired? Miriam felt the weight of it. The old version of herself would have rushed to reassure him, would have accepted almost anything for the chance to keep her son close. But that version of Miriam no longer existed. "Maybe," she said. Max swallowed. "Maybe? Repair takes truth." He nodded, and time, another nod, and no money. That one landed hardest. Max lowered his eyes. Miriam leaned back. "I won't finance a relationship anymore. You shouldn't. I won't rescue you from consequences." "I understand, and I won't pretend this didn't happen." His face tightened. "I know." For the first time, Miriam believed he actually did. Not fully, maybe never fully, but enough. Enough to begin facing reality. Whether that reality eventually led back to her or not remained unknown. When they left the cafe, they hugged briefly. Nothing magical happened. No promises, no declarations, just two adults standing in the truth. Sometimes that was more valuable. Over the following months, practical consequences unfolded. Lena lost access to every path she had pursued. The estate remained protected. The financial permissions were revoked. The records were corrected. The attempted control she had spent so long building disappeared. Without Miriam's support, the unpaid rent issues she and Max had ignored became impossible to avoid. Several professional relationships cooled after details of the guardianship dispute became known. Not because anyone launched a public campaign against her, because people paid attention when courts rejected claims of incapacity supported by so little evidence. Lena moved on with her life, but she moved on without access to Miriam. That mattered most. Max entered financial counseling, then therapy. Miriam learned this months later through a short message. Not a request, not an excuse, just information. For the first time in years, he appeared to be solving his own problems. Miriam hoped it continued. She also understood it was no longer her responsibility. That realization felt strange and freeing. The following spring, she sold the house. Friends were shocked. Some assumed the family conflict had forced her out. But the choice belonged entirely to her. The house had become too large, too quiet, too full of memories she no longer needed to carry room by room. She bought a smaller home closer to Eleanor, Patricia, and the community she had rebuilt around herself. The closing papers felt different from every document that had frightened her during the past year. These papers represented her decision, not someone else's plan. Part of her estate planning changed as well. She updated everything with Mr. Weber, carefully, deliberately. A portion of her future estate would support organizations helping older adults facing financial abuse and coercion. Another portion remained dedicated to her own comfort and independence. The rest could wait. For the first time, Miriam understood that estate planning was not about rewarding people. It was about reflecting values. One afternoon, while unpacking boxes in the new house, she found the blue wedding dress, the same dress she had been excluded from wearing, the same dress that had once represented humiliation. She held it for a long moment, then smiled. Not because the pain had disappeared, because it no longer owned her. The dress was proof. Proof that she had survived family betrayal, emotional manipulation, and the slow erosion of her confidence. Proof that being unwanted in one room had not made her worthless. She carefully placed it inside a cedar chest. Not hidden, not displayed, simply kept. Years later, if someone asked why she still had it, she knew exactly what she would say. Because it reminded her that she stayed standing. One evening, as the sun settled behind the trees outside her new home, Miriam locked the front door and looked around the quiet living room. It felt safe, it felt hers. For a long time she had been afraid that losing Max meant losing her purpose. That fear had kept her accepting things she should never have accepted. Now she understood something different. A mother could love her child deeply without surrendering her life. Love did not require permission to be controlled. She walked to the window and watched the fading light. Then she whispered softly to the empty room, "I was special all along. I just stopped proving it to the wrong people. Would you have forgiven Max or walked away completely? And can family still mean something after trust has been broken, if the boundaries finally stay in place?"